I think that's on. lady in my book club has convinced me now, as we're reading the book, we do it, that you can underline and stuff online. Well, so I tried that. I can't go back. You can't like
All right. Call to order the Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, October 19th, 2023. To start off, we will establish quorum.
So roll call is Commissioner Disney. Here. Commissioner Beninato.
Here.
Commissioner Doran.
Oh, very good. Here, thank you.
Commissioner Roach.
Here.
Commissioner Steinle.
Here.
Vice Chair Ahi.
Yes.
And Chair Mensinger is absent.
Okay. So next up, public comments on items not on the agenda. Does anyone have a comment on items not on the agenda? These are all, no. Anyone online? No? Okay. So we will close that item. Next up, the consent calendar, Planning Commission meeting minutes from September 7th, 2023. Would anyone like to make a motion? Okay, I guess a vote.
All right, Commissioner Disney. Yes. Commissioner Beninato.
Yes.
Commissioner Doran.
Yes.
Commissioner Roach.
Yes.
Commissioner Steinle.
Yes.
And Commissioner Ahi.
Yes.
Unanimous approval.
Okay, next item is a special item, the election of chair and vice chair. So I have this handout, which I'll just briefly read. So the election of the chair and the vice chair follows the guidelines outlined in the commission and committee handbook. Any commission member is eligible to serve as either the chair or vice chair. The election process is as follows. The current chair will commence the process by calling for nominations for the position of chair. Any member has the privilege to nominate another member to serve as chair, and nominations do not require a second. Following the nominations, a vote will be conducted among the commission members. If a majority of members approve, the nominated member will assume the role of chair. Subsequently, the same process will be repeated for the election of the vice chair.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
I know that we had moved a year or so ago to change the appointment of chair and vice chair on a cyclical with the city council, but seeing as Commissioner Menzinger's not here tonight, I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to ask that we wait till she is with us so she can weigh in also? Nick, any advice on that?
So if the commission would like to, as a majority, request to do that, that I think would be acceptable this time. However, all commissions have been asked to make the change of chair and vice chair in the month of October. So it would be abnormal. The city attorney's on, but I think she'll agree is that it would be ideal for you guys to move forward tonight. I do understand is that there is one commissioner that's not present to essentially be participative in the vote for who ends up being chair and vice chair. But obviously, Commissioner Mensinger will not be one of the two essentially because she's the outgoing chair. So it's kind of a little bit weird considering she's the person that doesn't really get to be one of the two again. So it's kind of, I guess, up to the commission at this point.
Oh, let me just ask, does anybody have any objection to that? And
Well, I do. Next meeting, someone else might be absent, and then like we don't always know when our meetings are going to be because like every other one seems to get canceled. So do we know? Are we having a meeting in 2 weeks, or don't know yet?
There is not.
There is not a meeting?
No.
So then it might be 4 to 6 weeks from now. Yeah, and I'd hate for one of the others to be out. I mean, I feel bad for Susan. I know she's sick, but I don't know. I'd rather just get it over with unless there's a reason to defer. Does anyone else have an
Anybody else?
opinion?
I would request to nominate Mayrus to be our incoming chair if you would accept it.
Yeah, sure. If the commission agrees, yeah, I'm fine with that. Okay.
Do we, should we be doing any succession, like, planning? Like, I know, like, I think you did a great job last time. I think you do a great job now. You know, is there anybody else who hasn't served who might want to? I'm not interested in it.
I mean, if anyone else.
I think Eric has not served and he's lots of experience and knowledge.
I hope you don't take it as, I don't want
No,
you to
no.
be chair, Maris.
Yeah.
I know you did a great job last time.
No, I'm fine either way, whoever.
And set a high bar.
Yeah. Yeah, so do we want to vote for chair?
Have you been chair before?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What was the order? When were you chair?
I
And-
was chair, I was
Last time?
chair prior to Susan, yeah.
And then Maris before that,
I believe so. Yeah.
and then no, and
Or it might have been Ronit, and then
It was
before
Ronit.
that it was me. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
wow.
been 2 times.
well,
Yeah.
I think the two of you should talk about it if you're both interested. And you know, like I don't know that we want to pit one against the
No,
other.
no,
but-
I don't. I've done it, so I don't mind. If the commission wants to vote for Eric, I think let's do it. Yeah.
It's fine with me.
Okay.
May the better
Yeah.
man win. No, I take that back. I'll lose that one.
Okay. So I guess.
I think that let's kind of make it really clean because we've already kind of talked. There's been essentially just discussion. So I mean, to kind of formalize it is so it kind of sounds like there's a motion. Someone wants to second Eric, and then let's take a vote on the chair, and then
Okay.
let's then talk about a vice chair so that we have this very clean for the minutes.
Okay.
Did you say you don't have to, you were reading that, does it say you have to second that motion? Did you
No,
say
they-
you don't
no.
have to second that motion?
There's no second required.
Okay,
no.
that's what I
Yeah.
thought is what you said, yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Okay, so
Yeah.
then does everyone on the commission want to confirm that Eric Steinley will be the chair for for this next year?
Yes.
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 Sure.
So the commission, all commissioners in attendance have affirmed by saying aye. Say aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
so then Eric Steinley will be the chair of the planning commission moving forward. The planning commission should then discuss the vice chair.
Right. And I guess,
Richard, are
I-
you interested?
What's that?
Are you interested?
I'm going to suggest Joe.
yeah, I was going to suggest Joe too, so
Yeah,
that would
do
be,
it.
we'll make that too.
Okay.
Do we have?
If you
any
guys want me
places? Do you
to.
have anything special?
Oh yeah. we might have-
You haven't done it, so do you want? You'd rather not?
Yeah, right, this is fine. I'm still in the learning process.
Well, so am
Oh
I.
my God. You should never be in a learning process when you
Or
come
maybe
on
when-
planning
when the
commission.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So. So I guess for Joe as vice chair. All of us agree.
Sure.
Okay.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Do I vote?
Okay, so it's a unanimous vote that
Yes.
Joe Benato is the vice chair.
Wow.
Now you get to vote chair.
Really?
No, I'm kidding.
I'm fine staying here. Unless I'm required to.
So yes, for the remainder of the meeting and then the successive meetings, you would be the chair and he would be vice chair.
Wow.
So the next thing on our agenda is our discussion item, which is the 3 ordinances. And Nick, I'm going to sort of ask you what you think the better procedure would be on this. We have 3 separate ordinances that are not really related to each other, but they're all changes to the zoning code. And the question I have is, should we consider and discuss all of them and then vote? Because it'll be 3 motions in any case, or take each ordinance individually. My concern here is public comment. If there's going to be a substantial public comment, it may be on one, but not all of them. And if somebody wants to talk about two of them, then there's a question of how many minutes everybody gets and that sort of thing. So it might be simpler to have, at least have the public comment in one chunk. And then we could discuss it's a question of how you want to present the report, discuss the three statutes, and then obviously vote separately at the end, and we could do that. So do you have any thoughts about that as a procedure?
Yeah, so the presentation tonight and the report is structured that it's comprehensive and goes over all of the actions that are then bifurcated into 3 standalone ordinances. So the reason why there are 3 is just because there was separate legislative actions by the city that actually created some of the specific regulations that we are either creating or that we're undoing essentially. So it's just kind of the cleanest way to do it for our documentation history of showing we created it by this ordinance and we're doing it away by this ordinance and not having to decipher what part of each ordinance is. So it's going to be that the public should make their comments all at once to the commission, and then we will discuss kind of accordingly by topic or by ordinance.
Okay. That's what made sense to me, so.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Then, for those who may be new to the process, the way we typically do this is the staff makes a presentation, that's what Nick was just talking about, and then we go to comments from the public on the topic that we're discussing, and when that is finished, that's the public part of the public hearing, and then we come back to the council, to the commission, and the commission discusses it, and then we'll take a vote at the end. So, Nick, I think it's up to you if you want to get started. And and between the time when he speaks and the public comments, there will be questions, technical questions from the commission for clarification, so that people making comments will have had the benefit of those questions and answers as well as the presentation. Okay.
Great. All right, so thanks, Planning Commission. So Nick Zorn's Development Services Director here. Apparently I thought that I was already going to City Council tonight, but this is Planning Commission on October 19th. So this is going to be the second larger batch of housing element ordinance implementation that we have to do. So again, just background for the folks that are in the chamber or listening online is we're here tonight because we adopted our 6th cycle housing element in January early this year. As a part of a housing element, this is one of the main components of a general plan, and as a part of a housing element, it's the city's strategy of planning for our fair share of housing. This is an 8-year planning cycle, which started on January 31st of this year and will run until January 31st of 2031. And this is something that is required and overseen and enforced by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. So the Development Services Department locally, it's the state level that oversees all of housing law compliance for California. So with that, the big kind of meat and potatoes of what our housing element is it's our housing needs assessment, it's our housing constraints, housing existing programs, our resources, our inventory and the methodology of that inventory, affirmatively furthering fair housing, or you might hear me ever say is AFFH. And then what we're here for today essentially is implementing our goals, policies, and programs of the housing element. So with that, our housing element requirements is we have to have goals, policies, and programs, as I previously mentioned. And this is the kind of meat and potatoes of our work plan of how we're going to do what we've laid out in the housing element in order to accommodate the units that we are allocated by the Regional Council of Governments, which is called ABAG. So what we're here for tonight is our overarching goal and policies for this particular amendments that are before the commission, which is to effectively promote new housing construction to meet Los Altos Regional Housing Needs, or RHNA. So the RHNA, so that's what we all refer to as RHNA. It's not a person, although we sometimes talk about her like she is. Policy 1.1, which is diversity of housing types. So this is to be able to provide a diverse range of market rate and affordable housing for different sizes, different densities in different zones. And this is for any type of familial status, so multi-families, couples, or even just individuals. Also, policy 1.2, which is to essentially create and facilitate mixed-use development in the city. This is actually some of the recent programs and policies the Commission and City Council both have seen with our first round of major implementing ordinances here from our housing element, which is to effectively remove the constraints of development of housing in the city. We do that by the promotion of city new regulations, modifying the zoning code to assist in meeting those needs, to be able to provide more dense housing and different housing options than what we have seen historically. And then also is to expedite the entitlement review throughout our entire process. So something to just kind of go over again, just because I know that there's a lot of people that are kind of new to the education component of the housing element, which is our sites inventory or the rezone parcels that we actually are talking about tonight, and as we've talked about in the recent couple of months. And so with this is what our site inventory actually is this is an identification of the capacity of how we will accommodate RENA. So there she is again. And this is something that we do by looking at sites in the city, and we look at our existing zoning standards, and we also then look at kind of what has been the development trend or lack thereof on some of these sites. And then we need to, as a city, encourage and facilitate the production of housing to all income levels throughout all of our housing element programs. And the site inventory selection is one of the key components of how we have to look at which programs we're going to facilitate on specific sites. So the site inventory methodology, I'm going to kind of go over the quick bullet points of this, as this is a part of the screening criteria that is developed by HCD, so the state guidance. And this is, does the parcel zoning allow for residential use? Is the parcel vacant or is it underutilized and is non-vacant? So meaning a development that's already there, but it's ripe for redevelopment. And then that does actually have an improvement to land value ratio that needs to be below 1 to 0. So a lot of our housing elements are essentially at the 50 percentile of what is considered the ILV, or the improvement to land value, and that is based on things such as the age of the structure and the condition of the structure. And then also we have to look at things such as what's the existing residential use, or if it's a park or a utility, school, or other public use with no redevelopment potential. So we do have to factor that in as well. And then we need to check for things such as infrastructure or lack thereof. This last bullet point, as I've talked about recently, is that's something that really is not going to be an option to what we consider, or what we are considered as an urbanized urban infill type of a city. And that is because that really bullet point really kind of applies to the unincorporated county jurisdictions, where it's essentially edge cities or edge parcels that really have infrastructure connection issues, whether or not sewer, water, roads, fire, so on and so forth. So talking about our required programs, I just want to kind of briefly touch on is that the 6th cycle really kind of drilled down into the program section. That's actually one of the biggest changes that was from the 5th cycle to the 6th cycle, and it was a really big game changer for us in housing law compliance. And it was that we really had to provide really specific deliverables in the housing element that affirmed the city's commitment to the implementation of our housing programs. So really kind of taking any of the guessing games of what the city was going to do to take its actions moving forward after adoption and certification of the housing element. But programs as a whole, they overarchingly cover the overview of the topic, what the specific steps that will be taken by a city are, the time frame in which the city will either kickstart the program, or one of the big ones is when we're going to obviously complete it by, funding sources to complete the program, and quantified objectives. So really what is going to be our end of the hunt realistic outcomes. And so jumping in with that, what we're here for tonight is one of the 8 programs I'm going to go over in the following slides, which is program 1A. This is to rezone for the RENA shortfall. So with that, I'm going to kind of really cover on the following slides is what I'm kind of highlighting in the red, because that's kind of the main kind of principle of what we are actually doing in all of the ordinances that are before the commission tonight. Which is that we have separate programs and details that specify various zoning actions that would provide additional capacity for all income levels. That's really going to be the kind of important component of this, because this program identifies is that we have a moderate income RENA shortfall, which means, you know, we're falling short on what we have zoning capacity for. And through the various other specific programs that we have in the document, we have to accomplish the increase of capacity for development of moderate units, which we have done in various other areas of the code by increasing density or the potential for development to occur on multiple sites throughout the city. And so with that, then we're going to go into what program 1B is, which is to facilitate higher density housing in the commercial thoroughfare district. So the CT district is essentially what lines our side of El Camino Real in all of Los Altos. So the big kind of components of this particular program is the city will remove or increase the density maximum of the CT zone, and increase the height allowed in the CT zone, and this is a specific quantified number, by at least 10 feet, and by which would result in 1 additional story, for a maximum height by the code of 55 feet and 5 stories. This will also specifically require the city to remove any increased setback standards when across the street or abutting a residential zoning district, and that is to be removed. So both of those main components are included into the draft ordinance. Program 1C is the allowing of housing in the office administrative, so OA district is what most of the people in town refer to it as. And this is to allow multifamily development in the district as it's currently not allowed, and then specifically allowing a minimum density of 20 dwelling units per acre and a maximum density of 30 dwelling units per acre. Both of these have been incorporated to the OA district as also other specific requirements in order to be able to facilitate the development of housing in the OA district. One thing that I will point out is where the number 20 and 30 come from, is that is a state default density which is developed and allows the city to use it. If we were to develop our own, that would be something that's that you really don't do, because the density would end up most likely rendering something even higher than that, just because of the development potential that they see with the 20 to 30 spread is what is kind of in the sweet spot, as they refer to it as. Program 1E is to update the Loyola Corner specific plan. Specifically, the Loyola Corner specific plan will be rescinded and revert to the underlying zoning of the CN district. This program includes the removal of all standards that are more restrictive than those applicable within the CN district. And this means that we will inevitably increase the building heights and provide greater flexibility in unit sizes. Program 1F is to rezone the Village Court parcel. The Village Court parcel, located at 4546 El Camino Real, will be rezoned from R110 to commercial thoroughfare CT, and modifications made to the planned unit development as necessary for consistency with the CT zone. One thing that is very important to point out about this particular parcel is this is what we call dual zoning or shared split zones. The entire Village Court parcel is not zoned R110, only a very small fragment of the parcel actually is. The majority of the parcel does carry CT zoning. There are other housing laws that would allow for it to take on CT zoning for the entire site because of the way that it has already been developed in years past.
So is that because there is that big chunk of housing that sits in the back corner of it? I mean, so it's still going to be inconsistent? It will be, one will be CT and one will be CN?
No, so
So-
it will all be CTs.
It will all be
Yeah,
CT,
it will all
okay.
be CT. So the important thing is to keep in mind is that they could actually already take on all CT for the site. So this is essentially like with most of our other programs is clarifying and affirming that we would allow it without question or any kind of negotiation because of the development potential of the site.
Can I ask a question kind of connected to that?
So really, we're not supposed to be asking questions during the presentation. Yep. So program 1G is to rezone housing sites from previous housing elements. So this means that we would allow the development by right. That's kind of the most important portion of this. There's actually only, it was either 4 or 5 sites that were actually in the table that are contained in program 1G in the housing element, but it's a little bit too long of a program. Every single one of them is CT zone sites, so they actually are already getting rezoned as a part of the CT program. We just have to further, essentially, like I've said before, is a lot of the programs are intertwined and overlap because it provides further kind of guarantee in our program implementation that we will allow for the development to occur the way that it needs to in order for us to see housing. The only other one that is not already zoned CT is the R110 portion of the Village Court Shopping Center. It is important for us to keep in mind is that the Village Court parcel was included in the 5th cycle zoning or rezoning program, and that was never accomplished over a decade ago. So we actually fundamentally have to redo that by state law. There is no ambiguity with us being able to not rezone the Village Court parcel because it was already included in the previous cycle. So program 3I, this is to facilitate residential care facilities consistent with state law. So this is where we would allow residential care facilities for 6 or fewer persons in all residential zones and districts. This is us just affirming what is explicitly in state law. We already have to do this. We have no flexibility in this. As well as what further then says is districts where single families homes are allowed by right, and we will treat them as a residential use. Additionally, we have to allow large residential care facilities of 7 or more persons in all residential zones without discretionary review. We will not be limited to any type of age restriction, and this has to be in line with what we would consider a barrier-free definition, specifically meaning that familial status doesn't just mean you and your kids. It can mean a variety of different things. So the draft ordinance that was developed is consistent with essentially the Department of Health and Human Services for the state of California. Again, there's not really much that we can do. This is very similar to some of the other specialized housing regulations that we already adopted in the last code amendment cycle. And the last program before the commission tonight is program 3J, which is to explicitly allow manufactured homes consistent with state law. So the city will amend the zoning code to explicitly allow manufactured homes on a permanent foundation, subject to the same regulations as single-family homes and in the same zones as single-family homes. This is actually already the city's practice. However, this is something that's required by state statute. And so we, again, are putting this and incorporating it into our local zoning to be able to affirm and assert what the city's position is by explicitly providing that language in our code so that there's no kind of negotiation with future staff that may not know some of these state level laws. So specifically, I'm going to cover really quick the office administrative district because that's kind of one of the ones that of our amendments tonight that is more specifically being modified beyond just explicit details that are already included in our housing element. So these are going to be some of the kind of main kind of objectives of what the ordinance modifications are. However, I do want to at least cover is what the existing OA district does or doesn't do is it does not allow, or it only allows for non-residential uses. There is no density thresholds because it doesn't allow for residential uses, so you wouldn't have a density threshold for that. Multiple lot coverage thresholds, so that means if you were to look at the red lines is that there's multiple lot coverage kind of allowances, and it just depends on which one needs to actually be taken depending on the site development. So that becomes a little bit excessive and kind of confusing for development to occur. There are excessive setbacks for the side and front setbacks. And there are also limited height regulations, which do keep the buildings at fairly low profiles. And there are outdated site area requirements and outdated subjective design controls. And the subjective design controls are already not applicable for the purposes of housing development. So what the proposed amendments do specific to the OA district is that it allows for the residential use to be a permitted use. It does require the density requirement, which is going back to the 20 to 30 unit range, which we are required to do. And it does remove the multiple lot coverage requirements and simplifies it to the one that is already within the code. It is to remove or to modify the front, side, and rear setbacks because we have a little bit of room to play with those, and to remove multiple site area requirements. So again, there's another level of kind of the multi-prongs of, which one do you use in certain circumstances. That becomes confusing, and it also does potentially hinder any development. We do need to clean up some of the parking requirements that are very specific to the OA district. The OA district is actually one of the only districts in the city that has specific parking standards to the district in and of itself. There is increased height for the structures that is going to be required for us to be able to facilitate housing production, as well as that we need to remove all of the outdated subjective design controls and replace them with obviously what we already all know is our objective design controls, which you already have throughout other areas of the code, but for consistency purposes of how we've structured it with all other districts, we will integrate those same design controls that be able to provide the design protections that we're looking for moving forward. Just a high level to cover what objective design standards, again, like we've mentioned recently, is in 2021, the city did adopt objective design standards that we spent quite a bit of time and money on as a city. These standards do include things such as building placement, building massing and articulation, upper story step back, so essentially breaking up the bulk and mass of buildings, which also then effectively does help with the vertical and horizontal articulations. This does talk about the adjacencies for designs of facades that are near R1 districts. This does address obviously privacy and line of sight controls as well. Roof design, building design as a whole, and creating pedestrian oriented entrances. Talk specifics about things such as window design, building materials, ground level open space as a requirement, and landscaping, paving, pedestrian amenities, and the site circulation and access, as well as talking about specifics such as service areas and screening. Service areas can be things as loading zones, but can also be things such as your refuge collection from the garbage haulers. So to quickly talk about the risk and liability is obviously if we do not implement some of our programs in the housing element, we will receive a notice of violation, which then means we are subject to a very quick turnaround if we do not come into compliance, which we would then be susceptible to builder's remedy. Again, as we've talked about recently, is builder's remedy is a zoning vacation. This is something that was originally established in the Housing Accountability Act of 2017. What that effectively means is that we have no development standards that are enforceable for any of our zoning districts while we are when we are in builder's remedy. Penalties for noncompliance are kind of the four main bullets. There's financial penalties, there are legal suits and attorney's fees. There is the loss of state funding, so our SB1 grants and funding sources that actually fund some of our road improvements, which is very significant dollars to the city. And then the big one, which is loss of permitting authority and our housing element being, or general plan being found to be inadequate. And when that happens, you do go into court receivership until you're able to bring your general plan into an adequacy level pursuant to state law. Obviously, we've talked about before, there's multiple legal suits going on throughout the county at some of our neighboring jurisdictions as well as across the state. It is really important for us to keep in mind is that YIMBYs, so Yes in My Backyard groups, can collectively file these now, which is a change in state law, which then could serve the city with a petition of a writ of mandate to come into compliance. So it's another prong and level of accountability that is now available to countless groups throughout the area. So the rezoning due date, this is something that I think is very important as it's been mentioned by the public in recent time, is why is the city doing this when our housing element says that the due date is for futuristically at the end of next year or even potentially the end of 2025. So all rezoning shall be completed no later than January 31st, 2024. So 1 year from the date of our statutory due date, which was January 31st of this year. Previously, we were given up to 3 years for some of our programs. So that's why some of the programs, if you look at the adopted housing element, have staggered due dates. Where we were going to have to do some of them by the end of this year, some of them by the next year, and some of them by the following year. That was kind of a way to be able to have jurisdictions really assert and try to get their housing elements done on time. You were given January 31st, 2023 to adopt your housing element, and then 120 days from that date to be found in compliance or certified by HCD. The city was not certified until September of this year, which was 3 solid months after or 4 solid months after the 120-day kind of grace period, as they used to call it. So we do not get the 3-year threshold, which is actually the adopted due dates that are in our housing element. So every single due date that is in there when it is tied to a program that requires a rezoning is now null and void and means that everything that is before the commission is statutorily due to be completed by January 31st, 2024. With that being said, there's also been the concern or the request of citizens in the community for us to delay this and to work on this actively. From tonight's meeting, we have 65 business days between tonight and our statutory due date to complete these rezonings. And this also means that we still have 2 more further city council meetings that we have to go to for this particular ordinance amendment. So time is of the essence, and we don't have much wiggle room to delay ordinance adoption or introductions. So the draft ordinance and next steps is that the draft ordinance does incorporate the key components into the Los Altos zoning code. And the draft ordinance does accomplish 8 of the programs that are required in our housing element. The next steps will be that the city council public hearings are scheduled for the first reading on November 14th and a second reading on November 28th. And with that, now we will open it up to the commission for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Are there any questions from anybody? Don't all speak at once, but speak.
On the height of the, in CN, max 55 feet and 5 stories, is that the maximum? Or if the developer opts to add some more low-income housing, can they get a premium and get that increased?
Yeah, so I believe you're meaning to say CT.
CT.
I know, very similar since CN was just something we just talked about. But in the CT district, just like with any zoning district, is if a developer were to propose 5 units or more, they are eligible for density bonus as it is allowed under Government Code 65915. That means that a developer is allowed to request, as they are granted, by virtue of providing a certain amount of their units as affordable, they are allowed to request incentives, concessions, or waivers from any development standards that are codified into the code. There is obviously some type of a threshold where someone, there hasn't never been a specific case where someone's able to, the previous conversation at a city council meeting was, could someone propose a 15-story high-rise? that I've never seen that actually happen, for someone to be able to utilize and multiply the story limit by 3 times. Obviously, it's their prerogative to request what it is, but there is the ability for the city to do financial analysis and feasibility showing that that is not necessary for the development to occur. But could someone increase their height by 1 additional story and 15 feet? They absolutely could, yes.
Thank you.
So a question about process, just so I understand. So this 65 days and the 2 city council meetings, that will constitute, that last meeting, they'll ratify or codify the rezoning of all of those properties in one motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question. Director Zorns, on I was curious about the OA zone, which butts up against R1 housing, as do other commercial zones in the city like CN. The uses, the permitted uses and the conditional uses was a odd mix of various things, including mortuaries and data processing centers and formerly blueprint shops, now reprographic uses. I am curious if there is anything holding us back from allowing other uses, like could a gym go in there, or a retail store, or a restaurant, or anything else? Is it just to try and keep the commotion down on that side of the street, or could we possibly allow other uses if we wanted to do that?
So it's not something that's kind of uncommon. A lot of zoning codes that use various old kind of standards for when they originally incorporated or adopted a local land development code, such as our own, have outdated kind of nomenclatures for some of the specific uses and business types. It's super common to see things such as blueprinting, shoe repairs, upholster stores that we would kind of just factor in as, retailers or, office admin, or, some of them we would just make kind of that determination that that's, in line with how the business operations function, like others. So obviously we can clean up our use section. That's something though that needs to be done in all of our zoning districts. Specific to OA, for example, is if someone did come in and they requested and wanted to do a gym, we would not allow that, because the definition of office administrative uses wouldn't really work and fall into that. It would then fall to me as the zoning administrator to make the determination, and I would not make that determination based on the allowed uses. I would say that would be something that I would kick up to the planning commission to make the determination on if they wanted to. Inevitably, I would though recommend to a commission or the city council that if a gym type use was something that we were okay with supporting in the OA district, we should include that as a permitted use or a conditionally permitted use, as it's not something that has a large impact to surrounding areas, as it's usually always contained fully within the establishment. I will say is that on essentially this side of the street, since we're on the city hall property right now of OA, which is adjacent to downtown, is we generally wouldn't see restaurant type uses immediately adjacent to single family districts, just because of the potential associated impacts with air quality and kind of smell and scent. Just because of the exhaust type systems. It's not really the noise, because they are quite quiet systems now, but inevitably there are some, aromas that do generally omit from any type of restaurant establishment. It's gotten a lot better over the years, but it still does pose some potential impact. So I wouldn't recommend restaurant uses as something if the commission did want to support any modifications to permitted or conditionally allowed uses.
I guess I would notice that in other zones that are similarly adjacent to R1 districts, there are gyms and restaurants and Starbucks and Lucky stores and all sorts of other things. And so I just wasn't sure, that side of the street was always a little bit weird to begin with in terms of the uses there, but I guess I'm not asking a question, so I should probably stop. But okay, thank you.
You can always say right at the end, and then it sounds like a question. Yes, that's no lawyer's trick. Okay. Kate, do you have some
I
questions?
do. So I'm looking at chapter 14.36. I'm looking at chapter 14.36, which deals with OA1, OA 4.5. And right on that first page in red, it talks about review, authority of design review. And my reading of this is that let's see, that the design review is done by the zoning administrator.
That is correct. So the OA1, OA 4.5 are very small lots. There's also not when you compare OA1 or just OA to OA1 4.5, there's different types of lots. So we would see these already qualify for anything that's 5 or fewer lots in the city already goes to the zoning administrator. So this is just a carryover what's already allowed throughout the code and as required in the housing element. This is also something to, obviously further help folks to understand is that there is essentially a little bit of a streamlined development review process for specific types of housing developments in the city.
So I have okay, so some of these OA1 lots are pretty integrated into R1. I mean, they're not like over on El Camino. They're fairly integrated into a residential neighborhood. A lot of them read like R1, even though they're not. And so I just want to be clear, if an OA1 parcel were to come forward with an application, and if it was 6 dwelling units, okay, so that's more than the 5, would that come before the planning commission?
Not as it's drafted right now, no. So this is to be able to facilitate, the OA1 and OA 4.5 is going to be a more challenging district to be able to facilitate redevelopment of housing on because it is already fully built out. There's also extensive uses that already are being utilized in some of the sites. And so this is one method for us to be able to streamline the process for potential redevelopment to occur if it were to be proposed as one of the kind of abilities to do so. Yeah.
I just want to say it's not in the program though for OA.
That's correct.
It's
So,
not
yeah,
in
so
there.
there
and
is
it
there is
seems-
some flexibility for the commission to strike that out. However, the thing is that what I'm going to continue to reinforce with the commission as well as the council is just because we adopt the programs verbatim as they are, we will be revisiting these in 3 to 4 years from now for the effectiveness of them. And if they are not effective and we have not shown due diligence and actually progress to meeting our RENA in these districts, I can tell you this is going to be one of the exact things that we're going to have to do. This at least buys us a little bit more time potentially to use the full planning period of 8 years for the city planning division to be able to actually try to make meaningful changes. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about a lot more changes in 3 to 4 years from now. So it's really going to be up to the city in order to be able to really see what we put forward. I will tell you right now, 3 to 4 years is not a long time. So one of the previous jurisdictions that I left after doing 2 housing elements there, they triggered no net loss, which is a very significant penalty essentially of having to go back to your housing element and add more sites. They triggered no net loss in 2 years. So that's at the quarter mark instead of the half mark. So that's because that's what happened with them. And it's very similar situations with what the potential unintended consequences are of not making the meaningful potential to create the development and regulatory environment for redevelopment to occur. So that is the full kind of meat and potatoes of what the thought process was for this, because the OA1 to 4.5 zoning district is a smaller portion and area of the city. And it's going to take a little bit more flexibility and kind of gravitas with, working with the developers to be able to provide redevelopment to occur in that area.
The reason why I bring it up, it just seems like it conflicts with what we already have in our housing element, which is 5 or fewer units go to the Development Services Director. So I'm just bringing that up. And I guess I was struggling with some of what you were saying, which seemed to imply that going through the Planning Commission is a big impediment to a developer. I mean, I don't know, I just feel like we're more, that our job is to review it and make sure that it complies, but also that it gives the public an opportunity to comment on these projects. And I know you would provide that opportunity if you were reviewing these. But, we have 7 people versus just 1 person. Anyway, I guess that's.
That's for later, because I had the same question, so that can come up in our discussion to talk about that.
Well, when do we ask the questions? Okay, because I don't really know when to ask them.
That wasn't a question, it was a comment. That's my point, is
Yeah.
we will come back to that. We can talk about whether we want to.
Okay, yeah,
to-
sure,
to- As a
right.
policy, I mean, which
Right.
is a decent question.
Right.
If you will, a policy question, but it's not a technical question about the text of the ordinance, which is what we're here to talk about at this moment.
Okay, I have a question about the text of the
I do
ordinance.
want to just clarify, because of what the commissioner mentioned, is so we do actually have an example of this year of a developer that waited until the zoning administrator authority was fully exercised, and they essentially requested to pull and delay the review of their application by 5 months, which is an extremely expensive cost for carrying when it comes to financial cost for them with their financing, because they specifically did not want to go to the Design Review Commission, which is a body very similar to the makeup of what the Planning Commission was. And it is because of the level of uncertainty that was previously afforded to the authority of the design review. The more cooks in the kitchen, the more potential the recipe is not going to turn out the way that is intended to by the actual recipe. And that's the best metaphor that I can give in regards to what the development community has full support for from the state legislature. So we have created and crafted the code and the regulatory environment that you guys would have before you as well. In the OA1 to OA 4.5 district as a whole is smaller in nature, and it's the authority is already there for 5 or fewer units. But this is also a smaller area and chunk of the city that provides a little bit of the flexibility for the developer. And it is elected or not elected, appointed bodies of review for development is considered an impediment to the creation of housing. That's why we're here tonight.
Your Jamba Juice is about to go over right behind your computer. There you go.
Wish there was more in it, though.
Okay. Kate, more questions?
I have 2 more questions. So there's a lot of mention about 50% landscaped, and I'm still kind of grappling with what that means. Do we, as a city, have a definition of landscape? Does it, say that all of that must be softscape? Does landscape include hardscape? What's the canopy requirement when we say 50% of the front has to be, landscaped? So I'm struggling with how this translates into buffering, because what we've done what the staff has done in their proposal is they've removed a lot of landscape buffers. In fact, in I think all 3, OA and OA1, OA1-4.5 and CT, is they're removing the landscape buffer, but they're replacing it with the setback has to be some percentage, 50% landscaped. And I think that's not quite the same as a buffer, and it would be really helpful, I think, to know what do we mean when we say a percentage has to be landscaped?
I'm looking to see if we have a
Because,
standalone.
I mean, I don't know if it means grasscrete, it just needs to be pervious, or does it mean category 1 trees, you know, and there is a huge difference, obviously, between those two.
Yeah, so it doesn't, the hard and fast answer is that it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be a blend of two. However, there's other regulations in the code that tie pervious or impervious to certain thresholds. This is just specifically talking about the amount of what is considered overall landscaping, which could be, again, pervious or impervious. Could be trees, it could be shrubs, it could be grass, whatever falls into the criteria of what we consider landscaping, which is very kind of, you know, broad in its definition. But then there's the other requirements of that we have certain thresholds and allowances that are required by the code. There's also the requirements of water efficient landscaping, or WELO requirements, which is a totally other part of the ordinance, and that's something that is a state requirement as well. So there's all of those kind of components that we have that's already a part of kind of the municipal code and requirements.
I guess I just would like to see those.
Okay.
Because, you know, I don't know what they are. Maybe I should know, but I'm not familiar with those, and it would be really helpful to kind of assess what the impact of all of this is going to be if we had that in the report. And then I have one last question. So let's see, I don't know the program numbers, but I can get it because I did print these out. In program, well, the OA program, it says that OA will be amended to allow multifamily with a minimum density of 20 dwelling units per acre and 30 dwelling units per acre, which is what you already said. But I was kind of thinking, like, where does 4 stories and 40 feet come from? And I did some research. It was with the California League of Cities, and they've done these planning commissioner academies. You know, we probably have, you know, had planning commissioners do those in the past, and what their kind of guideline on achieving 20 to 30 dwelling units per acre was a 3-story walk-up housing project. And I'm just wondering, how did we get from 3 stories, which may have been, you know, something that could have been proposed for 20 to 30 dwelling units per acre? How did we go from, I guess, the existing 2 stories and bypass 3 stories, which I would have thought would have been kind of in line with that density target? How do we get to 4 stories and 4 feet, you know, or even 45 feet if it's mixed use?
So the existing height requirement is 30 feet, 2 stories. We've seen 0 redevelopment in the OA district, especially immediately adjacent to the Civic Center. Non-residential real estate and development is much more profitable than residential development. So I think those numbers that you're referencing are out of date. I have preliminary pro forma data specific to prototypes the city has seen, and the density that is required to actually facilitate housing production is greater than 20 to 30%. The height allowance, additionally, is going to have to be increased in order to accommodate specific units and sizes. Again, we should be looking at creating the regulatory environment that actually encourages development to occur using our local regulations rather than having to deploy density bonus. This is something that we actually just talked about at the state planning conference, is that there have been more developers playing by local ordinance when the regulations are consistent with what they need to make their projects pencil. The bare minimum just doesn't work anymore with the way that construction costs are today. So if we were to create the bare minimum, which would be what you're kind of mentioning is the 3 stories. I think we're going to inevitably see density bonus used a lot more intensively in the OA district, as well as we are going to most likely be revisiting the height allowances and going to be right back to where we are. So this is, again, giving ourselves more regulatory kind of wiggle room, so to speak. You know, right now, the city, we have seen a slowdown in discretionary multifamily mixed-use development applications in the last year because the interest rates are incredibly high. And so developers are going to have to be concerned with that. And this is kind of something that as the development services director, I have to put on my economic development hat and kind of bridge the gap for us as a smaller agency and realize that we are going to inevitably be in a pinch point where we're going to be having to look at a lot of project approvals in the second half of our planning cycle if we are not able to truly show kind of some of the show the data or show our work, you know, as they say in school, is, you know, that we've done and created the environment and we've actually approved the projects. They just haven't pulled permits yet because they're waiting on the financing. And that's kind of where every year our annual APR, so our annual progress report to the state, comes into play. Is we have an entire spreadsheet that shows permits submitted and applied for. We show another spreadsheet that shows permits approved, and just that number, and then permits that are in building plan check and permits that are pulled permits and then pulled for occupancy or given occupancy. So we have to show all of those, and that's just for multifamily and single family. Then we also have another spreadsheet that then tracks ADU production. So it's very, very specific, and the state's starting to reconcile at what point of the development stage is actually starting to become the pinch point. And I think right now in the 6th cycle, which we didn't anticipate when we were, you know, unfortunately having to do these, you know, studies and numbers, is that we have to now realize is that we're going to have financial implications because of the economy. And so we need to be able to create the regulatory environment for some of these projects to pencil out, which is going to inevitably be denser and taller buildings. We've also talked about that as how do we incentivize mixed-use development at the Rancho Shopping Center and in the CN district as a whole. And like I've shared with the community is that there's 3 main buckets. It's an increase to height, it's a reduction in parking, and it's financial incentives. Well, I can tell you the financial incentives, we don't have any pot of money to provide a developer. So we're left with increasing and providing the regulatory framework that incentivizes them to be able to do the development.
Okay.
I had one more. Maybe Deputy Director Williams might be able to help us out. I was curious, you know, on the other side of El Camino in Mountain View, the buildings appear to be taller than the ones on the Los Altos side. And what is, like, I'm pretty sure Avalon, the apartment place or condos or whatever, is like 10 stories. You built those? How many stories?
Many. There's 10. There's 10.
Oh, are you talking about the one behind
We
Target?
built that
That-
in like the Cure 2.
Across,
It's kind of
Yeah,
next to
it's that
Target
one.
on El Camino, yeah.
Yeah,
what, any,
think 10
like how,
stories.
are they 10 stories?
yeah, because life safety changes above 10 stories.
I mean,
So-
that one was done in the 90s, so it's not really.
It was done in 2000, just so you know.
So we're proposing 5 stories and 55 feet, and with density bonus, that would go to possibly 6 stories and 66, is that right? 11 feet?
Yeah, so our on-menu concession in our local density bonus regulations is 11 feet, which someone could just take as the height increase and not do a story count. It depends on what works for them in their prototype.
We actually had before I think you came on the commission, we actually had, I think the Union 76 station was in that density bonus, and they wanted a 5th story and they wanted the concessions. So, and they were going to wait us out. So I actually, you are absolutely right. People are waiting us out, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Maris, any questions? No? Okay. I have just a couple. It's a very good report, Nick. Thank you very much. I did have flagged the same thing that Kate had flagged about the OA district. And we'll reach that. We'll talk a little bit about that. You answered the question that I was going to ask, so that's fine. The other thing I noticed since we're talking about unusual changes to the permitted and conditional uses in the CT zone, you crossed out cocktail lounges. And as background, I'll point out that my first appearance before the Planning Commission was to protest the fact that there were no bars on El Camino Real. So,
That's a UBI.
well, I can walk. So, would you like to explain that?
Yeah, so cocktail lounges is something the city has historically moved away from requiring as a conditional use. Our downtown is one of the single biggest areas of the city that we do not regulate cocktail lounges. They're considered an ancillary use to things such as a restaurant. Restaurants is a permitted use in the CT district, excluding drive-throughs. So any new drive-throughs wouldn't be allowed in the district. But the cocktail lounges would be an ancillary use, as we've done with downtown. It's just bringing it more kind of consistent with the practice. I wouldn't imagine us having an issue with a restaurant serving liquor on El Camino Real and us thinking that it's better to have it in downtown Los Altos. Because usually the biggest rule of thumb that you need to be concerned with is the safety component or the proliferation of alcohol uses in an immediate area or what's considered a district with the ABC. And it's not something that would or is an issue. So I would recommend us deleting it as a conditional use, considering it's pretty much what we've done in town. And it's also something that is predominantly, no matter what agency you're in, is a state level, the Alcohol Beverage Control Department, ABC.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's all the questions. So the next step is the public comment, and I'm going to open up the public part of the meeting. I have four cards. Stephanie, is there anyone online?
There is one person with their hand raised online.
Okay, so that's a total of 5 people, so I think we can give 3 minutes to everybody. That would be reason. Oh, 6. Oh, now we have to cut it down to 2 minutes, everybody. It's her fault. If you wish to speak, but you will have to fill out a card. You don't have to fill it out before you speak, but because you will be recorded as having been here. You have time because I'll put you at the end of the line then, if that's okay. So you have the time to fill it out. Okay, so I think we can still do 3 minutes per person. And we'll just go ahead. We'll start with those who are in the room, and then we'll go to the person who is online. And I'm just going to take this in the order in which they were handed to me. So the first person is Nels DeLander, and after that is Nancy Martin, okay? And after her is Tam Terry, and then there are some other people after that, okay? So the timer should show up there. Well, I know that, but we don't want him to turn around while he's talking. Oh, yeah. Oh, there's a little button. Yeah, right. So we can hear you. Everybody can hear you.
Thank you.
Is this all?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, are we? Well, we have it there. But unfortunately.
No, he'll have it on the lectern.
Oh, weird. This is fancy. Okay.
Okay.
When you're ready.
I'm ready now.
Okay.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of Los Altos, my name is Nels DeLander. I'm a field representative of the NorCal Carbies Unions. I stand before you today to address a matter of utmost importance, the need for strong area labor standards in our community. It is crucial that we prioritize a livable wage, accessible health care, and a steadfast commitment to apprenticeship programs. Also, it is time we put an end to unacceptable exploitations of workers by developers who pay substandard wages. Los Altos is a vibrant community, and its prosperity relies on the hard work and dedication of its residents. We must ensure that those who contribute to the city's progression is fairly compensated and treated with dignity. A livable wage is not a luxury. It is a fundamental right that allows individuals and families to meet the basic needs and thrive in our society. Healthcare is also a crucial aspect of supporting our workers. Access to affordable and comprehensive health care should not be a privilege reserved of a fortunate few. By advocating for health care provisions, we can guarantee the well-being of our workforce and help the ability to contribute effectively to our community. Equally important is a commitment to apprenticeship programs. These programs offer invaluable opportunities for skill development and career advancement. By investing in local talent and providing them with quality training, we not only empower the workers, but also foster a robust and resilient local economy. Also, we must address the issues of developers exploiting workers by paying them substandard wages. We cannot allow such practices to persist unchecked. It is important that we enact policies and regulations to protect the workers and ensure the developers who enter the community abide by the fair labor practices. Together, we can build a stronger, more equitable community for all. Tonight, I hope you adapt these conditions in your housing elements so we can protect the workers from poor working conditions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeLander. Nancy Martin is the next.
Hello. Waiting for my timer to go on. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Okay. So I thought tonight, and I guess it is about rescinding the specific plan. So here's my comments. I'm representing many of the residents of Loyola Corners who love and value our little corner of Los Altos, excuse me, that represents our city brand and our history. It's important for residents and the future generations to feel connected to this history. We don't want to become another victim of the impersonal, high-density box housing with no setbacks and nebulous height restrictions. Even 50 feet is inconceivable for Loyola Corners. We all know it can go higher with the density bonus. Most homes in Loyola Corners are one-story homes, and they would be overshadowed by these huge developments. I understand that you need to rescind the plan as it is to make in accordance with the housing element restrictions. But we would like to propose that if you do rescind it, that you allow us to recreate a new plan. And because it's important to remember that the original plan was developed by residents with a consultant, and it was written to retain the history of the area and beautify it. Basically add some nice elements and make it a place we all want to live. So we're asking that if you do that for us, we create a new plan that let us create a new plan that will encourage developers to build housing that fits with our vision for retaining our historic look. I'm happy to organize and accept responsibility for recruiting a group of residents to create a new plan and with or without a consultant, and it could be overseen by Nick Zorns if needed. And I understand that time is of the essence, so we're ready to go. I know we can create a new plan that encourages developers to create design-conscious housing for our area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Tam Terry is next. If I mispronounce somebody's name, please. I have a terrible name to pronounce, and I have absolutely no ego, so correct me, please.
I apologize for the bad handwriting, but I'm also known as Tom Ferry.
Well,
Thank
whatever.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Ferry, my
Congratulations to
apologies.
the new chair and the
Thank you.
vice chair. That was kind of fun to watch for me. Thank you. Good evening to all the commissioners. I am Tom Ferry, a Los Altos resident. First, I'd like to thank the commission and city staff and the council for getting the housing element approved by the state. I know it's been a few weeks now, but thank you very much. That was a big milestone, so congratulations. And my topic is also the Loyola Specific Plan Program 1E. And as a previous speaker mentioned, I would also like to propose that if you are going to rescind the plan, that you would do as the previous speaker said and create a group of developers, city staff, residents, business owners, and figure out what you need to do to the plan to not only meet the state requirements, which I think we all want to do. That seems like a good thing to do. But there are other elements of the plan that can be incorporated. I think there's actually more potential. And I think you could root out some of that potential in terms of units, housing units, if you get a group together. So I would highly encourage that. And I also would volunteer tomorrow at 12 works for me, if you want to start tomorrow. And I think, as a lot of people say, Loyola Corners is not downtown. It's not El Camino. It is different. And that was really the impetus behind the specific plan. It's unique. It can be very vibrant in terms of adding housing, but it's not downtown and it's not El Camino. And that's why the specific plan helps. And some of us are veterans of the specific plan, from the initial planning to modifying it, compromising with new developments, and so on. And so I think it's proven to be pretty robust. And as residents, we've proven to be pretty flexible when new things come up. New state laws and the housing element are a great reason to revisit it. I do have one issue that I would like you to take a look at, though, in the agenda summary report. Near the bottom of page 4, it says, Loyola Corners specific plan, which has been an impediment to the creation of housing as well as any large-scale revitalization of the area since its inception. I kind of take exception to that. I'm not sure what the evidence behind that statement is, and I would be happy to change my opinion if shown some evidence, but I have two questions. What evidence is there that the plan itself has been an impediment? The only one I know of is 999, and I think we can all agree that was kind of a crazy proposal. And the definition of large-scale revitalization, what is it and do we want it? I don't know what large-scale revitalization is. So I would ask you to consider that text in the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay. Next is somebody whose name I can pronounce because I know her, Deb Skelton.
Thank you. My name is Deb Skelton, and I want to thank Nick very much for getting a plan that passes. I've been to many of these meetings. It's all pretty confusing to me still. But what I do feel is that, let me step back for a second. I have been a participant in the Loyola Corners specific plan since the late 80s. So I've been involved in the changes, and I was actually involved in the very first rendition of it. I think that people who have served and worked on the plan have shown that there can be flexibility, as there have been changes over the years. So I understand that we need to implement more housing. There's no doubt about that. That's not even the discussion. But can't we do that and also keep community standards, a sense of community, a sense of place? We can implement more housing in Loyola Corners and still create something that we're proud of. I just feel like it's not one or the other, that we can work together and pull this off. There's a lot of great stuff in the specific plan that creates a viable and good community, and I would like to see some of these things remain, as well as increasing and identifying lots that can hold more housing. The other thing I wanted to mention is, as a teacher, I've been, as I go home from these meetings, what I find is that nobody is talking about the kids. I was over on Winchester Avenue today, and I've been around in San Jose and seen a lot of these new developments go in, and I am concerned that children have no place to play. And I don't think that we in Los Altos are doing anything about that either. I've written to Gavin Newsom. I will continue to write to whoever I think will listen to me or read my letters. But really, folks, we have to do something, and I don't know what. I don't even have the idea. Maybe it's provide incentives for developers or something, but we've got to have something for kids to do. If we house these children in apartments and never give them free play, we will not have leaders of tomorrow. I'm a teacher, I know this stuff. Anyway, that's really all I have to say. Yes, we need more housing. We also need community developmental standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Skelton. And the last one I have here is Peter Mills. And, oh, I'm sorry, Teresa. I skipped past you. That's okay, that's okay, that's okay. If we can do Mr. Mills and then Teresa will do you? Okay, that'll be fine, okay.
Good evening. My name is Peter Mills, and I'd also like to thank the commission and the staff for pulling together a plan to solve a very complicated problem. My biggest concern has to do with parking. I'm nervous we will be turning neighborhoods in Los Altos into battle zones for parking like San Francisco. And I don't know if the commission has a public report or a study that explains where all the cars will go. If we have 30 units per acre and we have 1.5 to 2 cars per unit, we're looking at 45 to 60 parking spaces somewhere on the street. Nick mentioned that parking regulations have been relaxed, and I'm just wondering if we have looked at that and have a solution in hand before it gets out of hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Teresa Morris is the last person in the chamber that I'm aware of.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am Teresa Morris. I am a commissioner with the Park, Rec, Art, Cultural Commission now, and but I am not speaking as a commissioner this evening. I'm only speaking as a resident. I want to make that clear. Please only rescind the Loyola Corner specific plan if it must be rescinded. I live in South Los Altos. I've been active with a group there called Los Altons for Neighborly Development for many, many years. There are a couple hundred of us involved in the group. And we have shown up over and over and over again regarding the Loyola Corner specific plan at meetings with the city council and so on. And there is great support for keeping the plan in place. I understand that it's been added to the housing element to be rescinded, but I'm asking you, if it's rescinded, please resurrect it and have us do an update to it. Residents would be thrilled to once again step in and work on that plan. And we could hire a consultant, or we could work with our able-bodied staff if they have the time to update it in a way that would help encourage development in that area without losing the character of the area and without losing the small businesses that are thriving in that area. And we have many businesses that have been there for many years and that are thriving. So I would ask that you consider the resurrection of it once it's been rescinded in a way that we can update it. And as I mentioned, I do believe that a good plan could bring development into the area and actually encourage it. And if residents were involved, and I've said this many times at city council meetings and other meetings, let's form a committee of residents that looks at how we're going to get this housing built. So we can have all these laws, we can have all of this happen on paper, but let's make it happen in reality. We need the housing. We particularly need housing for people who are low income and moderate income, not the higher income. We have plenty of that in our city at this point. So please give residents a chance to show what they can do, and let's get this housing built and moving as quickly as possible. Thanks so much for your time and all of your service.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. I don't think there's anybody left in the room that hasn't spoken, but if there is, now's the time to speak up. Okay, then I think it's Stephanie, it's time for Roberta.
There's one speaker online, Ann Paulson.
Oh, Ann Paulson, I thought it was going to be Roberta. Okay. All right, then, well, she and I had talked earlier, so I expected that she would be on the phone. Okay, we're ready?
Yes, Ann, you're on. Please unmute yourself.
Mute. Okay. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, new Chair Sinley and Planning Commissioners. I'm Ann Paulson. I'd like to comment on the right level of approval for OA1 and OA 4.5. Several of you were discussing this earlier. So Imagine a small builder who wants to put up a sixplex on Altos Oaks in the OA district. This is just a little building, and this is something we'll allow under the new standards. This is a pretty simple building, pretty simple construction, 3 stories. I think it can be a walk-up, 2 or 3 units, two units per floor, parking in the back. It's like a big house. We have detailed objective standards. We have planners that work with applicants to refine projects so they satisfy our standards. If we allow this project to go before the zoning administrator, we have a public hearing where the public can speak. And that's enough. We want this little guy, this small local builder, to succeed. And for a little guy, the way they succeed is by being quick and simple. This building is barely bigger than a house, and it doesn't need the full planning commission to be weighing in on it. I don't mean to impugn you guys. You guys are great. You do good work. Oh, we don't need a nuclear bomb when a fly swatter will do. The zoning administrator is the right approval level for little projects on Altos Oaks and the other little projects in the small OA1 and OA 4.5 zones. These are going to be little projects. In general, these ordinances look great, and I urge you to recommend them as written. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paulson. And unless there's somebody else,
That is all.
that's all. Okay, well then I will close the public portion and bring it back to the council, or to the commission. And we'll go to anybody who would like to. I would just make one comment before. I'll wait until everybody else has spoken. But a 3-story walk-up would violate the Americans with Disabilities Act, so it's not going to get built in Los Altos. 3 stories is okay. The walk-up part, however, is not legal. So we're not going to do that.
Well, and just to clarify, if it's 5 or fewer units, regardless of the zone, it's going to be approved by the staff.
Under the current.
So if it's really
proposal.
little, it's going to be 5 or fewer units.
Yeah.
That's already in the housing element.
Yeah. Mhm. Do you want to start with
Well,
comments?
actually,
do you want to,
I have
or do
a
you?
process question. How are we doing this? Because we've got all these chapters, and I think it'd be better to just
Well,
discuss one at a time.
We are going to have to vote on them individually, so what we can do is take each one of them, and then we could do the
Yeah.
vote. I mean, that certainly is possible.
Okay, I
Yeah.
like that idea.
Yeah.
I want
No.
to just, that's my.
We wanted to get the public part done as one thing, because otherwise
Mm-hmm.
it was unmanageable. But no, you're absolutely right, and we can start with the first ordinance, which has to do with chapters 14.34, 14.36, 14.50, and 14.63, leaving the Loyola Corners and the little shopping center, the name of which escapes me for the moment. Village Court, yes. Leave those separately. Okay. So let's then focus on those 4 groups of changes, okay, which is in the one ordinance. So, Kate, did you want to start off, or do you want to wait, or I'll let you.
You know what? I'll let
You'll wait.
someone else go.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Anybody want to say something?
Are you asking for discussion?
Discussion,
or,
yeah.
Or if there is no discussion,
Yeah.
we could move to approve those
Exactly. Well,
and then move on.
And do the
So,
ordinance, that's right.
Yeah, so if there's no discussion, okay.
I just had the one about the OA uses. Do we feel like the uses that are in the documents are adequate, or do we want to restrict or add or do anything different to it?
That is a question. Anybody have a thought?
Oh, my thought was, I thought what zoning director Zorns explained to us is that there's a lot of latitude in that, rather than fooling around with the language tonight. We move that forward, and there's always discretion in these, like he talked about a gym, and he talked about the restaurant, so I'd like to just move that we push these through for approval, this first group, and not change the language on that.
I would join you there, but I think I took them as for instances. So,
Yeah.
and ultimately,
Okay.
if somebody comes with something, it's going to be up to somebody, in this case, either us or the zoning administrator, to say it is consistent with, or
Right.
it isn't consistent with. And then there's always the option for an appeal to higher
Correct.
authority.
Yeah.
You know, so, I think
That's
the way
fine.
it
My,
works.
my only concern was, zones that are next to R1 have different uses, and we should be more consistent around what are the uses or what are the setbacks, or, like each site probably has unique parameters, but I'm fine leaving it as is.
Yeah, I suspect that in some of them, the R1 housing came to the site, and in some cases, the site came to the R1 housing, so maybe
Yeah.
that. The other thing is, it did strike me that the things that were suggested were things that were relatively quiet, relatively low traffic, not a lot of people coming and going, not a lot of noise being
Mortuaries
generated.
are quiet.
Yeah. So, I mean, so it's consistent in that way with not disturbing the neighbors, whereas other places, it wouldn't matter so much. So it struck me that, and with respect to, since I'm talking, I'll just continue talking, having the housing administrator do the first step of the approval, it does seem to me that since the OA is both office administrative and housing, and we would not normally be looking at the OA portion of it, it makes sense to have a single procedure for that, because there's always the option then to come to this commission, or if there is a problem, if the developer feels upset, that's that option. But that it does make sense to have a single procedure for a single zone. And since these are mostly office administrative and less housing oriented, perhaps we should be thinking about it from that perspective, at least until things change. And then that can always be modified if it turns out there's more housing, and it would be worth having this commission be involved.
Sure.
So
So
that-
I
that-
move
that
that
would
we
be my
approve,
thought.
I'll move that we approve
Steph,
this.
don't
Oh.
go, let's not move to approve yet, because I think there's more to be said. We're not done.
No, they
Oh,
haven't
are we
had a
not
chance.
done? All right,
Yeah.
I'm asking, are we done? Are we not
No,
done?
no, we're not done yet.
Okay.
No, I want everybody to get a chance to speak if they something to say. You have some things to say, yes?
Yes,
Yes.
but I do have a question about what you just said.
Could you
Okay.
turn your mic
Oh.
on?
You said there should be a single procedure. Am I missing something? But if it's an OA, if it's an office administrative type project with no housing, is that not something that's going to come before the planning commission? Is that what you meant? If it's-
I think that's what I meant, or that's what I was, that it would make sense to have a single way to deal with these. Whether it's coming to us or it's going to the housing administrator, one road to follow, so to speak, for whatever developments there are in those areas, since it has two different things going on, potentially housing and primarily the office administrative developments, which are already there too, which is the other side.
So the way that again, to be more in line with what we're doing and moving towards with a lot of the development, is the intention is that the OA1, OA 4.5 would be reviewed by the zoning administrator for a housing-only development, actually not a mixed use. This is actually one zones that is actually different than just OA. I'm not proposing that we allow for mixed use unless they propose that under density bonus, specifically because if we're gonna see redevelopment, because I know that's the concern of the city, is if we're gonna see redevelopment, it needs to be in order to help us meet our housing quota. We don't, I mean, to put it as like kind of just, simple talking, at someone with coffee is, no one really cares if the OA 1 to 4.5 district gets redeveloped with commercial. They're happy with the way that it is today. So we don't need to create the regulatory incentive for it to happen unless it's going to be able to chip away at what our city's single biggest hurdle is going to be, which is housing production.
Okay.
But right now, the way it's written, the way it's proposed, if it's mixed use, it would go before the planning commission. It's, the way it's written, the way it's proposed by staff, is it would only go to staff if it was residential only.
So you kind of said it both ways. So you're saying that the review authority of design review for OA1 and 4.5 is just for my review, or it does go to you for when it's mixed use, which you kind of made it either way.
Well, I thought I said the same thing two different ways, but, okay, let's just keep it simple.
Right,
If it's
so
a
it's-
mixed-use project, where does the project get
Because if it
approved?
qualifies as a housing development under state law, it's a housing development, which means that it has to be it has to be 2 units or more, and then it has to be 2/3 more in square footage. So there's the trigger point is that even if someone came in and exercised density bonus, they could still qualify as a housing development. So the intent is that, I mean, it only is gonna go to me as if it's truly qualifying for a housing development project pursuant to law. But we're not creating the framework where someone could do a mixed-use development environment and have, something that isn't a housing development, and be mixed use, but have a little bit of residential and more, commercial. We don't want that in the district. So it's really the intent is that we're creating the environment that is influencing residential only. However, if someone were to exercise because it's a part of, let's say, their pro forma in order to make it pencil out, and they want to have a little nugget of the development for commercial, then as long as it meets the qualifications of a housing development under HAA, then it will fall under my purview.
Okay, so it wouldn't have to be residential only. I mean,
No, it
that-
doesn't
that-
have to, but they're gonna have to exercise density bonus to get mixed use. So it's a little bit different than OA, where OA is a standalone. They're gonna see they have all three as remain non-residential under the existing standards essentially, or you're gonna get mixed use or residential only and kind of get all the other allowances that kind of go along with the height increase.
But Nick, mixed use qualifies as residential under the definition of a housing development project.
Right, that's where that 2/3 rule comes in.
Yeah,
As long as
2/3,
1/3, so the 33% maximum is non-residential, and then 67% as residential, and that qualifies under the Housing Accountability Act as a housing development.
Okay.
But if they were to exceed it by 0.1 and go over the threshold of the 1/3 allowance, then it is not a housing development. They're not protected under the HAA, and then they would get kicked into, well, actually, they wouldn't even be allowed. It wouldn't be allowed in OA 1 to 4.5, because we don't allow mixed-use development. So they'd have to have something that exercises the HAA and a request for density bonus. So they are very much into a very specific product if they were to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I do have a couple comments about OA and OA1. We're just talking about those two, or we're talking about everything?
Well, we're
CT
talking
as well?
about, yeah, that whole range of things.
Okay, so with OA and OA1 and 4.5, that zoning allows for 2 stories currently and 30 feet. That's the maximum height. And should I wait, Shelley?
No, go ahead,
Okay.
It's a little ominous. You can hear people from the restroom, so she'll know what you're talking about as long as you project properly.
Okay. Am I?
It's a little scary, trust me.
Am I on? Is green on?
Green is on.
Green
yeah.
is on,
Green
okay.
is on.
All right,
Just
so,
speak into the mic.
so we're going, okay, we're going from 2 stories and 30 feet, and we're proposing 4 stories and 40 feet, which I think is a pretty big jump, and that's to achieve the 20 to 30 dwelling units per acre. And I'm feeling like, okay, we have to encourage the production of housing, and I'm okay with this. But what I'm struggling with is the change to the setbacks, particularly in OA1, where the front is going from 20 to 10. And that's a big change. And I'm wondering, how do we get street trees in front of these projects when we're shrinking the front setback? The side setbacks are going from 10 to 5. No change, though, if it abuts R1 for the side, which is good. And then the rear is, for OAs, going from 25 to 30 if it abuts R1. And it's going from 25 to 20 regardless of what it abuts for OA1 and OA 4.5. And I'm just wondering, like, Why aren't we being consistent? Like the density is the same for all of OA. The height and the number of stories is the same for all of OA. It doesn't matter if you're, living over there in an R1 or you're living next to Altos Oaks in R1, R1's an R1. I'm just wondering if in one area we're proposing a 30-foot setback in the rear if it butts R1, why aren't we doing that consistently? And, specifically, why aren't we putting that into OA1 and OA 4.5? I'd like to see the setbacks be consistent where it abuts R1. And then the other thing is, in all of OA, right now, we require a 10-foot landscape buffer, I think in the rear if it abuts R1. And we're taking that away. We're saying that there's a setback, but we're not stipulating that there be, a buffer of landscape. And this kind of goes back to my question earlier. I'm really concerned what we get. We were sitting here a month ago, and there was a discussion about Rancho and fire lanes and access. And it made me think, well, if we are having to carve out access to protect a building in the event of a fire, if that's what goes into the setback, then what isn't in the setback? Trees and landscaping and screening. So I'm concerned with the fact that we don't have any landscape buffer here, and I don't know how people are going to be protected in R1 if there isn't any kind of screening.
So when it comes to street trees, downtown Sunnyvale is a very good representation of that they have a 10-foot setback around the new mixed-use development that's just adjacent to Murphy Street. I'm there every day working out, so I know because I walk around the magnolia trees and try to hide from the crows before my workout class starts every day. And it is a 10-foot setback, and the magnolia trees are growing and thriving, unfortunately, because the crows love them. But that's just an actual example of very large trees that, do thrive in a 10-foot setback, because it ends up talking about, it's really how you end up structuring the tree well and any potential podium structure for parking immediately adjacent to it in order to be able to provide the root structure for that type of a tree to grow. So the 10-foot setback I actually think is 100% going to work for our trees, potential future kind of canopy of new and improved trees that end up coming as a part of newer development. At the end of the day, I will at least just say this, is trees do fail. Plant life does not live forever. We do have to replant them. That's, we've seen a lot of trees fail in the last several years, even here on the Civic Center property. In regards to the 10-foot explicit requirement for landscaping in the rear, is we do have objective standards that do say that we have to screen with landscaping. But it isn't a 10-foot strip. It's being able to provide a little bit of flexibility in the development standards to that. For your prime example is if there's going to have to be a drive access, we can't say you have to have a drive access of 26 feet for Santa Clara Fire plus 10 feet. So that's 36 feet, because now we're diminishing the potential lot development area. So it's really going to factor in is exactly what can actually all get penciled into certain areas in order to be able to provide adequate area. Specific to the OA district, 18 feet, it's super uncommon to see kind of a number that's not divisible by 5 when it comes to setbacks. I honestly, I've never seen that in my career of having weird kind of numbers like that. Maybe like a 7.5 where it's a denominator of 2.5, but having it as 18. So the reason why you would see an OA is different than OA 1 to 4.5. They are different. There's different areas of the city. The lot depth is totally different as well. The more deep the lot, the more generous some of the setbacks could be. The more shallow the lot with OA 1 to 4.5, they are more narrow not as deep as of the depth of the lot. So realistically, it's not always going to be the best circumstance to have all of the setbacks be the same, because then we're going to end up with what we don't have in Los Altos, which is a very cookie cutter community to say everything is going to be this exact kind of setback. You want to provide some of the zones with explicit setback requirements that do deviate, so that you have kind of some differences in overall design in the jurisdiction. But when it comes to OA specifically is where you see we're kind of, I explained it to, a resident, is that, we're robbing Paul to pay Mary in regards to setbacks, in regards to the base setback. So the housing element requires us to remove any of the extra excessive setbacks, like in the CT zone, for example. CT, if you were to build over 30 feet, you go from, I think off the top of my head, a 40-foot setback in the rear to, if you go 1 foot over, you're required a 70-foot setback. That's, will render most of the lots infeasible for any potential redevelopment. So specifically with like OA, for example, for the things that are going along San Antonio just from the Civic Center, is we have 18-foot setbacks where we can reduce that down for the front yard setback immediately adjacent to the sidewalk down to 5 feet, and we can take that and add that to the rear or to the side. So one of the things that, we have a little bit of flexibility, because again, we're reducing one to then maybe put it there, but still resulting in a net reduction of setback requirement, meaning there's more lot area for the site to be able to have development potential for a new building envelope. So as long as we're still at a net reduction, we have nothing to worry about in regards to what we're providing for development potential. But we are still then providing the little bit of certainty that we're able to provide residents, which is, and I've had very frank conversations with folks that live immediately adjacent to the OA district, is they do not care about the front yard setback, and they rather have the protection of whatever is going to be the setback, either rear or their interior side is what we call it in planning, their interior side yard setback that has a little bit of an extra, essentially buffer of an extra 5 feet, because we're going to rob the front yard setback to add a little bit to either the side or the rear. I did look at the entire aerial zoning map. There is not, unless someone did a mass lot consolidation, which I really do not foresee happening in Los Altos, there is not a single OA zoned parcel that would result in having an increased side and rear. They would only result in one. No OA lot backs up and has a side setback that goes next to an R1 zoning district, which makes sense because the OA district lines essentially San Antonio for a big bulk of the OA district. And so it wouldn't have that. We don't have a single RA or an R1 zoned parcel that fronts San Antonio, for example. So that's kind of the actual practical of what we have, boots on the ground essentially, for our actual parcels in the city.
That's interesting what you said. So the front, OA has an 18-foot front setback, and it's being proposed at 5. But the OA1 and OA 4.5 is being proposed at 10. Mm-hmm. But I like what you said, that people don't care about the front. I mean, of course, everyone else might care about the front because that's what we see. But if you, like you said, rob Peter to pay Paul, you move 5 into the rear, and that takes your rear setback from 25 to 30 feet in the OA. But can we be consistent in the rear and say, okay, like I said, it doesn't matter where you live, R1 is R1. So it seems like we should be consistent at the rear, because that's probably where the impact is going to be to the R1. And so can we make everything consistent, or at least, okay, leave OA alone because you're already proposing 30, which is good, but OA1 and 4.5, can we at least make that rear? And this is not for Nick, I guess this is for the planning commissioners, make that the same as what R1 is, which is 25 feet, so that they're held to the same standard as the R1. So that's my idea, is to make that 25 feet.
I actually looked at this. You can see my little chart of rear, front, and side setbacks,
charts,
which
too.
we probably should have shared, but it was a little confusing. But my observation is that the OA lots they seem to be larger in size than the OA1 and the OA 4.5, Altos Oaks, and a couple of random, there's like 3 parcels or 4 parcels right by El Monte. So I was looking for the same thing, Kate, which was like, is there consistency? But the 30 feet on OA seems generous, in my opinion. And the other ones, I guess it's 20 for OA1 and 4.5 is 20 feet. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
And then 10 if there's an alley, which I didn't really understand exactly. Yeah, I don't know where that would come in.
have alleys, yeah.
But then CT was 25 and CN was 20. So, I think, I talked to Director Zorns about this earlier today, and for each one there was logic behind why we're squeezing the front or the sides or the back or whatever it might be. So I'm inclined to leave it as is, but if others want to do something, I'm fine to support that.
I actually don't like the 30. I think that a lot of these OA sites are pretty small. So I think that what you're going to see is that a developer is not going to be able to, he loses 30 feet in the back. So they're just going to want to go up. And I don't know what that does, but a lot of these sites are very tiny. Like I'm looking at the map right now, and a lot of them, the 30 makes sense. But there's some of them where the 30 is like, you're not going to have a nice looking building. So I remember when this was being talked about, and I thought 30 was going to be pretty rough. And for the other ones, the OA 4.5 and the OA 1, they're even smaller. So I don't think that is really going to be, I mean, you're just going to end up with really tall, skinny buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if that's what the commission, if everyone wants to do that, we can. I don't really like the 30.
What would you suggest, Maris?
I do want to just at
Yeah.
least somewhat mention, just because this has even been a recent topic of conversation at a zoning administrator hearing, is anytime you're requiring more setbacks, the likelihood of them going, creating more up on the structure, you're going to increase that potential because you've reduced or diminished the development building envelope in regards to its horizontal kind of potential. So then they have to look at how they can recapture that in a horizontal component of the structure. So Commissioner Ahi is correct, is that is the more setbacks you create, the more potential you're going to have them to go up. And there's not much we can do one way or another. I will just at least, again, just reiterate is that this was trying to bridge the gap of what we have in our code right this second. After talking with some people that live immediately adjacent to the OA district is what I thought would pass essentially the community laugh test of it. But it's obviously definitely up to the commission if you guys want to recommend something that's a reduction that beyond what was presented to you tonight, you can. I just wanted to further kind of clarify just so that you're aware.
But Nick, can I?
Yeah.
I mean, they can also ask for waivers.
Yeah, that's correct. So they would be able to waive and reduce the setback as well. But again, you're talking about what you think at the local level can we do to incentivize them to stay at what we want as our maximum, or depending on how you want it to look, or our minimum setback. So it just depends, is what they're going to be willing to accept.
Nick, if a developer comes in and it's the 20 feet and they say, we need that full setback for parking and fire access, we have no room for trees at the property line, what does staff say?
So, I mean, we would try to work with them. I mean, myself and Stephanie have, chatted with developers directly to be like, well, why can't you do, something, creative, whether or not it's a landscape diamond or a small strip to be able to somewhat break something up in order to be able to provide, the on-site landscaping. But again, it's site by site, so it's kind of case by case. I guess, we have to look at it that way. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to somewhat be a little bit understanding and cognizant of is that, unless someone's going to build something in downtown Los Altos, which is essentially for all intents and purposes 0 setbacks across the board, and their building, really ends up being an internal kind of design feature and maybe a roof amenity for their outdoor kind of enjoyment, when there is any kind of open space or access drive, I don't know of any newer developments that are like, oh yeah, we're not going to do any landscaping, because at the end of the day, they have to sell the project at the end of it. And if it's, ugly and very institutional looking in regards to, concrete everywhere and no, living space, I mean, the product has to also sell. So, I mean, there's that component as well. So that's a little bit of kind of something that ends up being market driven kind of, feasibility where, especially if it's going to be housing, most people that are coming to Los Altos also want it to be welcoming by the landscape that we do have in the rest of the city and not be the standalone hard surfaced entire lot. And so there's also a little bit of that reality check that comes in where the city's never going to be a part of that equation, because we're trying to tell them, yes, do as much as you possibly can, but inevitably they're going to do what they know is going to end up being something that they can sell the project for.
Commissioner Ahi, could we go back to, so did you have an idea in mind? I mean, you have experience with this with, project you're working on right now, right? In Mountain View. I'm just curious what would make sense.
I mean, obviously, I think it's just I think 20 maybe is the number.
For the rear?
For the rear. I mean, the thing is, for the CT, there was a lot of interesting things that we did when it was facades adjacent to an R1 district. We talked about like not having balconies or roof decks that are facing the R1, and some other design controls. I think at the end of the day, I think landscaping and views into R1 backyards is paramount. I think that, respecting the neighbors and privacy, I think is really important. But I just think that 30 is going to create really, really unattractive buildings. So maybe 20 is the number, but also with the caveat that there has to be some landscape buffer, and to try to prevent views.
Can I make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
You've got 20 proposed for 1 and 4.5. You have 30 proposed for OA, and you got 25 proposed for CT. And 25 feet is the setback, rear setback for R1, correct? It's still 25 feet. Why isn't it just 25 feet across the board for all of them? Because yes, the developer has constraints, but the resident that lives next door is concerned about privacy and their rights. So there's that balance, and I'm just wondering, does it make sense to just, because they're all, both OA and CT are pretty intensive developments. It's all like, El Camino at this point. So why not just do 25 feet across the board with, and then that gives at least 5 feet for some landscaping and some buffering, which you say is important.
Yeah.
And then you still have room for some fire trucks too.
Yeah, I think 25 makes sense, especially since the CT is more intensive. So it makes sense that the OA would be 25.
For OA, yes, but not for OA1. Those Altos Oaks lots, like especially the ones that butt up against the park,
Yeah.
they're not very deep. That would be like half of the lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know for the OA1 and 4.5, I'm not sure.
But we would, okay, so for a really narrow lot, they could come in and say, I want an incentive, right? There'd be some wiggle room on that if it was a unique site. Wouldn't that be the case, Nick, if they came in and they said, I need some bonuses? Couldn't we relax the setback in the event that it's kind of a unique situation?
If they have to prove up the incentives of the waivers, and I'll let Nick explain it, but
Yeah.
it's not like you just don't ask for it. It has to have some justification.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where the sticking point is on this, is that we have that whole group of lots that will hit that. Plus, I actually don't think that they would comply with fire department regulations in that one neighborhood. In that
The
small,
OA1?
yeah, in the OA1, I don't think it complies. I think you have to actually have like 22 feet in the clear to open a fire truck. So so the way I feel is our zoning director does have some discretion. We also have some discretion to do these. They're not set in stone. We have latitude. So if we change it to 20 or 25 feet, we're going to create a problem on the other side. So that's how I feel about it. I mean, I would leave it at 30 right now and then use that latitude of discretion after that without having people having to ask for variance or having to ask for, like Jolie said, a special circumstance and have us make a decision.
So I think what you're proposing is leave it as proposed.
Leave it as is, and then take them case by case. Instead of mandating it right now and knowing that we're gonna have residents coming to us, asking us for waivers.
Yeah.
And I'm really concerned about the fire, knowing what I know about how fire trucks move through development. So I would be really concerned, especially in that one section of housing on Altos Oaks, if we did go to 20 feet about fire trucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, if we start being too restrictive, if we have too many things, that begins to look like a constraint on residential development, and it's going to potentially trigger a very unfortunate result as we go along. Now, maybe down the line, if things work out, we could change it, but I wouldn't want to attract attention, and this might attract attention. That's one thing. Also, if we do it so that we develop a skinnier, taller building, that adds to the engineering costs, and that also is a constraint on residential development. It's exactly the kind of thing that developers go and complain to the state about.
Right.
And if they do that, then the state comes in and takes all our toys away.
Yeah, and the other thing is it also has to do
We have to
with
be very
parking.
careful about that.
Right.
Right? Is that, and I'm sorry to say this in Los Altos where trees are sacred, but the state couldn't care less about trees.
Yeah, we're really
They
restricting.
really care about housing, and that's
Sure.
what we have to worry about here. Now, we need to find ways to put as many trees as we can in, but mandating it is not the way to do it, because they'll say, take the trees out. That's their simple solution.
Yeah.
So that's what we're dealing with. That's the reality.
I'm not really sure I can agree with that. But did you say that you think 25 feet is the minimum due to fire?
I want to leave it at 30 because I'm worried about 25 feet, understanding how, when a fire engine is completely open, working for many years up in Los Altos Hills, understanding turning radiuses and opening a fire truck.
Yeah.
But the other thing
But-
is, if we get tall, skinny buildings, then we're handicapping also a developer to force them to go underground for parking, which then actually makes the site untenable financially.
Right.
So we're kind of opening ourselves up to a lot of criticism, not just criticism, but some, potential maybe lawsuits about why they can't develop these properties.
Right.
I mean, for the fire truck, just looking at the sites on the OA, there's a couple that are large enough where maybe the architect will have something in the back, but a lot of them, I think you would service them from the front. I don't know if you'd have to go to the back. I don't even know how that would be possible for some of them. So I just think logically having it be more of a setback for the OA than the CT, I think doesn't make a lot of sense, because the CT is just so much more dense than the OA. So that's the thing that
25 for both? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I would say. I think that's a little bit better. A lot of these sites I think are just very, very narrow.
But you know what, I think it may be what Nick said about the neighbors. Maybe the 10 was proposed in the front, and they said, okay, push the 5 to the back and give us another 5 feet there. And so that's why the front is being proposed at 5 instead of 10, like the other OA, right? So what they did is they said, we'll take the 5 in the back. So I think there's a lot of, work that's gone into this.
Yeah.
I'm suspecting that there's a lot of work and input sort of that we're not seeing from the neighbors. And I'm feeling less like I want to monkey with this now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm with you.
okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
No, I worry about the 30, but if Maris and I are the only two, then I guess we have our
I mean,
answer.
at the end of the day, you're just gonna probably end up with developers that ask for the waiver if they can't make it work, and
And do 15.
you know,
Right.
and yeah, maybe some, yeah. So I mean, I guess you just have to play. I mean, obviously, we haven't had a project yet, so it's hard to say. That's
Yep.
why.
And-
No one's
and
really
their burden-
wrong.
Their burden, by the way, isn't that heavy, so that they
Yeah.
just come in and say, I can't do it otherwise, and we have to say, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the waiver. So Shelley wanted to make, she's been waiting
Wow.
to make the motion, so go ahead
Yeah.
and make the motion.
But
It's a
wait,
very complicated-
one thing before you do that. We never resolved the issue about where these projects go if they're 6 or more units.
Lights are turning out, there's
And I am trying to get to that page. Here it is. The review authority of design review for OA1, OA 4.5. I'm thinking you're going to make the motion, but I would like to remove that and leave this so that it complies with the housing element, which is 6 or more units for a housing project comes before the planning commission.
I guess the question is there support for that as a, I mean, because either, well, there are two ways we can have it. We just make a motion, and then you could make a friendly amendment, and it's either accepted or not accepted by the mover, or, you make that as a separate motion. Do you have?
I'd like to ask Nick jump in on that.
I mean, I think I previously explained it as, I mean, it's a way to create a regulatory incentive. So, I mean, I hate to say it is for all extensive purposes, that makes me feel that the commission wouldn't trust me to make the best decision for the project that would be presented before me. At the end of the day, OA1 and OA 4.5 will be smaller developments because of the lots in which they are. The majority of OA lots are immediately, or OA 1 to 4.5 lots are immediately adjacent to either city-owned parcels, which is either the MSC Municipal Services Center, public parks, or multiple schools. There's actually very few of the parcels that are immediately adjacent to R1 standalone. So that's just a component. But again, this is just an opportunity to be able to create the environment for allowing it, as it's just what we see. And for all intents and purposes, if it's 5 or less units, it's coming to me regardless.
Right.
So.
Right, and I think we also, in this environment of needing housing, that we need to help our residents, we need to streamline some of these things, and that's just a minor way, a minor streamline, and so I want to move forward with my motion to approve this.
Okay, yes,
Yeah,
so proceed.
okay, I don't have it up.
We'll applaud at the end.
Yeah,
because it's
let
quite a
me see, here we
performance.
go, so attachment 1. I move to approve the ordinance, to move it forward to the city council, amending chapter 14.34, 14.36, 14.50, and 14.63 of the Los Altos Municipal Code to implement program 1A, 1B, and we haven't discussed Loyola yet, 1C, 1G, 3.1, 3J of the 6th cycle housing element update.
Okay.
CEQA.
And
Jolie, is there a CEQA?
is there,
Yeah,
I
there
don't
is.
know.
There is.
Sorry.
And yeah, and find that it's exempt.
I'm sorry, say that
Yes,
again?
It's exempt.
Oh, it's exempt, and this is exempt from Secor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Yeah, is there?
I'll second.
Okay. It's,
I do have a question about, I would like to take a vote on the issue of what we just talked about. So do I make an amendment now, a friendly amendment?
you want to make a friendly amendment, and if they
Or
accept the friendly
can I
amendment,
just do a separate motion, and if it fails, it fails?
that would have to be afterwards then.
Okay, that's fine.
If you do that. So otherwise, it would be in the form of a friendly amendment, and
I don't think you're going to
they're
accept it,
the
so I'll
amendment,
make a
so-
separate motion.
Okay, so
So,
the motion
Wait,
is
wait.
to approve the.
and we have a second.
The ordinance as presented in the staff report, and it's been seconded.
So you do need to make a friendly amendment, and if you accept it, so the procedural way is if it's accepted, it's accepted. If it is not accepted, the commission that votes on it has the opportunity to vote no because they think that the friendly amendment should be included. So it's kind of the way that's
yeah.
why it matters as to who's making the motion first.
Got it.
So if Shelley's not going to accept the amendment, then you should all vote accordingly as if you would want Commissioner Disney's amendment included. Otherwise, then the majority vote would be what accepts essentially the motion as presented.
Would you accept would you just accept the amendment, and then if people don't want it, they can vote no, and then you can make your motion again without that language in there?
I think it's
The-
the opposite.
No,
I
it's
mean,
the
with
other
the
way
No,
around.
it's the opposite.
It's the opposite,
Yeah, the other way around. If you vote yes, then you're voting for her motion. If you want her motion plus your amendment, you vote no.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Is that clear to everybody?
So, and you're not accepting the amendment?
I am not.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So then I have to vote no. See, that's the problem, and then I
Yeah,
look like,
that's
the
okay.
bad,
Well,
the bad guy.
Government, it's government, yeah.
okay.
Okay, roll call. Commissioner Disney,
No.
Commissioner Benenato,
Yes.
Commissioner Duran,
Yes.
Commissioner Roach,
Yes.
Commissioner Steinle,
Yes.
and Commissioner Ahi.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is a 6-1.
It is 9:15, and I think it probably would be a good idea if we took a little bit of a break, because we have two more things to deal with, plus other things. So I think it's 5 minutes, a long 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that.
I'll second it.
Okay. We won't keep it, it's 9:15, and so 9:25, we'll try to pick up again. Okay.
No snacks? Yeah. They don't provide snacks for us?
No. We're not supposed to go this long.
Hey, the mics are on, people.
Okay, let's all gather together, and if everybody is back, let's get started. So we can, it is not our intention to compete with the city council. We would like actually. Well, you know. Okay, so the next thing in our, is the second ordinance, which has to do with Loyola Corners. And we've heard from the residents about that. And so it's going to be the same thing. We're going to have a conversation, and then there will be a motion, one way or the other.
I do have a question.
Okay?
Two things. One is, Nick, as far as ownership in the commercial district along, I guess it's Fremont, the Fremont Street, is there one common owner for all of that retail, or are they separate owners individually? At Loyola, because you were talking a little while ago about, aggregation in that OA district. Is there a possibility of aggregation, or does somebody own that whole block?
No, there's for the majority of fragmented parcels, it is a very messy parcel structure of what's immediately adjacent to 999 Fremont. I believe I know at least three, and it's three. It's three. Yeah.
And is there any latitude, as our residents were talking about, is there any latitude if we adopt the ordinance the way it stands to have a comprehensive group again put together to look at some specifics in Loyola? Or does that fall by the wayside when we adopt this, if we blanketly adopt this? Is there potential to discuss some guidelines if we adopt this the way it stands?
So, for all intents and purposes, the Loyola Corner specific plan falls short as a land use regulatory document for a variety of basic principles that are supposed to be in it. The city attorney can opine on that. It's been years of a lack of the regulatory document being further implemented and developed. The one kind of component as a land use and planning professional that I could tell you that I would say in any city, the only useful component of the Loyola Corner specific plan kind of anything, at least in its applicability today in land use law and housing law in California, is the Loyola Corners streetscape final design, which is published on the city's website. Everything else is either already addressed in the underlying zoning districts or is not a defensible, component that's in the specific plan. It's all subjective, and for all intents and purposes, it's a very flowery kind of vision, desire.
So that wasn't my question.
Yeah.
I know
Okay.
that has to go away. My question was, is there any potential to have a document like that that gets incorporated into the housing element, or is ancillary to that at some time? Or once we adopt this, if we adopt it the way it's written, then it's set in stone and there's no resident input from this point forward?
So I guess I would turn it back to the planning commission is exactly what is not in the CN district that you would then be looking to incorporate in another subsidiary document or in that specific zone that's not already addressed.
I guess I don't know. And
Yeah.
I probably am being a little bit ignorant about what's there and, so
So
it's not a fair
fundamentally,
question to you.
the big component again is it's going to be more of like the streetscape. It's going
Got
to be the public realm improvement space of Loyola Corners. The private property land development is bound by the housing element of whatever the underlying zone dictates of the CN district.
Got it.
So for the development of a building, the community doesn't get a say-so anymore based on what the housing element says. It's an increase in height, density, and an allowance of overall intensity of the site.
Very similar to what happened at Rancho. Very similar to how we, okay.
Yeah.
I got it. I get it.
Hey,
Thank you.
Nick, yeah, Nick,
Mm-hmm.
so there currently is a Loyola Corner specific plan, and then there's Loyola Corner specific plan zoning. And I believe by adopting this change, all of that's going to go away, and you will just be back to the normal CN zoning. And also, you'll be back with the adopted objective standards. So I'm not sure what kind of other overlay that could be done on the specific plan area. I mean, I'm kind of throwing this back to you, Nick, because there's the Loyola Corner specific plan. There was Loyola Corner specific plan zoning that required use permits for certain things, but this is all going away, and it's just going to be Loyola. It's just going to be CN zoning, and it's going to be subject to the CN zoning objective standards, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then a little bit more about the Loyola Corner specific plan. It was developed as a statutory specific plan, but it never got effectuated as a statutory specific plan. There was supposed to be a parking assessment district form that was going to help fund some of the circulation elements and resolve some of the parking issues. There was never the funding. There was never the infrastructure. There was all the kind of the framework of the specific plan all these years never really got effectuated. So it's more of a concept plan or a design plan. That's really what I think has remained over all these years.
That answered my question. Thanks.
Question. The zoning on Rancho was modified, I believe. Can the modifications that were made at Rancho be applied to, as a modification to Loyola?
It is. So that's the underlying zone. It's the commercial neighborhood zoning district.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and this is sort of a question for Jolie, and I'm sorry we're going to go in the weeds for a minute, but it seems to me that under the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, basically anything that's inconsistent with the general plan has no effect, and this would fall into that category. So essentially, right now, the Loyola Corner specific plan is legally ineffective. Now, if that sunsets, of course, at the end of next year. If it's not extended in some way, then there's the question of whether application of more restrictive building standards, which are part of the specific plan, would not constitute then constraints on residential development, and therefore would invite all the awful consequences that we've already talked about. So that either way, any attempt to reduce the size of buildings or to reduce the footprint or any of the sort of things that are done in the Loyola Corner specific plan, or the zoning part of that, would end up not being possible.
Yes, and like unit caps, that's not allowed with SB 330.
Right.
And there's certain things about it that really are not, we shouldn't be doing, so.
So we really don't have any choice then, if I understand correctly. The state has simply taken away our ability to do that because the general plan, it's not consistent with the general plan. The general plan is the housing element and is the CN district. And that's that, right? Jolie?
Yes.
That's what I would say, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
We need to be consistent with the adopted housing element.
right.
So I had another question for Director Zorns. I think this is a similar situation to Rancho where there are 8 homes across Dolores Avenue from Loyola Corners. And depending on your definition of what is the front and what is the back, the setbacks could be, 0 or 20. The side setbacks are 0 in the CN zone. So what, for the parcels that are in Loyola Corners along Dolores Avenue and in the pink, according to the Los Altos zoning map, are those, what would be the front of those parcels and the rear of those parcels? Because it dictates how far from the housing across the street they would be. Any sense?
So when I'm looking at the zoning map right now, the majority of them, the front would be the lot line that is immediately adjacent to Dolores. For three of the major parcels, one of them would be determined to be actually there's 4 that would be the front, and then there's 1 that would be a side because it's a double lot corner. It's a corner lot. And then the other one, it would be as it's oriented today even, is it would be an exterior side yard as well. So those ones would be, so it's essentially 3 or 4 as a front yard and then 2 with a side yard.
So some of those would be 0 feet from Dolores Avenue, possibly, the building envelope?
For CN, yes.
Wow. And can we fix that somehow? Or that would require us to go in and monkey with CN, which is not advisable?
So the difference is from like the OA district in which we talked about earlier today is that those side, rear, and front, there are side, rear, and front setbacks. The CN district only had a rear yard setback. There was 0 lot lines for front and side. You can't so the Housing Crisis Act uses 2 words. At first, even planning professionals all took it to the reduction of density. It was reinforced by the legislature where it says intensity, which covers things such as setbacks and height. You cannot reduce intensity unless you add it somewhere else. So actually what I just discussed kind of in depth, and the commission all kind of understood it in layman's terms, is I effectively, with the OA district, kept in the main principles of the Housing Crisis Act by not reducing any potential development intensity by robbing Paul to pay Peter. In the CN district, you don't have that flexibility unless now we're going to talk about the reduction of the rear yard setback.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I do, just for my colleagues, I mean, I do have a concern that someone could back up a building to the street and create a 4-story wall that would cast a shadow across the street. I don't know, perhaps we could be convincing in our discussions with individual parcel owners, if they were planning to do that, but that seems like a problem.
So, but that's the only thing though, and again, this is really hard it's not just Los Altos, it's not just this commission, it's not for the residents in and of themselves. We're talking about project design as if we have a project. We do not. There has also single-handedly not been a development in downtown Los Altos that has been built or approved even under the objective design standards that were codified in 2021. This community is still trying to design from the dais without a project even in hand. So I would urge the community and the commission and council to acknowledge the fact that we are still trying to create a regulatory checks and balance when we've had not a single project designed to be able to actually say, this is what we're going to get. Is it actually what we want? We're trying to be preemptively, overly cautious about something. Our objective design standards do actually address when something goes above 2 stories that you start having to pull up upper step backs for each floor by 5 feet at minimum, which in in translation, you end up creating what in planning we like to joke around is you're creating the wedding cake effect, which quite frankly we actually don't like, but it's what the community wants and that's fine. Is you end up creating a pyramid where instead of having a perpendicular structure to your horizontal land area, you're creating an arched portion, which then allows the light to cascade, where when it's perpendicular, you're blocking it. So when it comes to daylight plane, you're creating it, you're addressing it, but you're not gonna have a perfect silver bullet for every project. And that is by virtue of the fact that discretionary and subjective determination has been stripped of all jurisdictions in California. So we need a project in order to be able to, like what I say with staff is refine and define what we're doing. But we don't have anything to kind of go over at this point.
Yeah.
But I think you bring up, can I go ahead? I think you bring up some issues that are specific to Loyola Corners. And we do have a specific plan. The problem is it conflicts with the underlying zoning. And I'm wondering a creative solution might be that instead of rescinding the whole plan, because there are elements that are good, like the streetscape and how, what we're going to do with the connective tissue and how pedestrian and how people move around and street trees and so forth. So maybe the solution is just rescind the elements in the Loyola plan that conflict with the underlying zoning. Now, that maybe not much left, but at least leave it intact so that you can come back later.
We committed to it in the housing element.
It says, let's ask Nick. Nick, what it says is.
The Loyola Corners specific plan will be rescinded.
But then it says, I think, it says, where does it say it? It says whether it's amended or, where is that? Oh, I think I'm on the wrong page here.
Program 1E.
Okay, let me go to it.
But this is
Regardless of whether the specific plan is updated or rescinded, the program includes removal of all standards that are more restrictive than those applicable of the CN district.
So that's what I'm at, like,
So what I'm gonna convey is that there is nothing that is going to further protect things such as what Commissioner Beninato mentioned about perpendicular obstruction of a 4-story structure that's in the Loyola Corner specific plan, because it's all subjective. So that's where I mean, we can go through it after this, because here's the thing, I don't actually believe the validity of how that document was adopted, written, and has been modified consequently multiple times over, that's in conflict with today's law. What happened in the 90s, it might have worked then, but I'm not confident that it is. Me and the city attorney have talked about this several times over. So I do not full-heartedly think that there's things that are really defensible. We can look at it, but if anything's subjective, it doesn't apply. So,
but what about the streetscape?
But see, then that's the thing. The streetscape, the concept design plan was, again, another layer of something to do, but then there's been no implementing program or adopted feature to create an improvement district and a funding mechanism to actually do this massive multi-million-dollar streetscape. One of the ways that you're going to get that is by virtue of having development occur. That's how most cities pay for their downtown improvements and streetscape improvements, is by having it's your frontage improvement cost, and that's how you pay for it. I don't know of a jurisdiction that really pays for everything out of the general fund. And for all extents and purposes, that's what we've done in this city for several years for things that are typically paid by the private development that actually occurs. And so for Loyola Corners is actually more ahead of the game when it comes to a conceptual streetscape plan than even our downtown. But now we need to, and if you look over the ordinance, I don't say anything about the streetscape. I was very intentional with that, is that we're not rescinding and saying that that's in the garbage. We can extract that and further implement that, as an improvement, district essentially, and then that's how you end up funding those overall improvements.
But if we just rescind it the way it's proposed,
Mm-hmm.
the streetscape does get put into the garbage.
No, because the streetscape was never folded into, that's the thing.
So is it
I've
not
tried to
in there?
explain this
Is
several
it-
times to community members, even what the community thinks we've done with the specific plan is not actually what land use law will defend if we were to have to defend ourselves in court. We have not, we did this plan. We have a conceptual plan. That's it. Like we have the ideas of what we want to do. We didn't create the funding mechanism to actually do that. So you have these design plans that there's nothing to do. You have no nexus even in the specific plan to say this streetscape will be implemented by these projects. We don't have that. We have a regulatory framework of how we will do things, but then we never did those things. We created a conceptual visual plan with no way to actually tell someone you have to do it. I mean, there's no objective process to be able to require a developer to do that. So that's what I'm saying is that the essentially conceptual plans of the streetscape and the process that was undertaken, in 2009, I believe it was, is when it was finished, is that's there. That's not being rescinded because that's not the regulatory document. The regulatory document that goes nowhere, that is being rescinded. The streetscape is still there and the conceptual plan can still live on. I mean, I'd be curious to know if the community actually still likes conceptually the circulation, the flow, and all that.
Where is the streetscape? It's not in the document?
It's a subsidiary standalone
It's
conceptual
not-
plan that was completed by the city.
Okay, so it's not in what we're rescinding.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful.
But it's not adopted either.
Yeah.
It's not adopted.
Right. So we're not
So-
rescinding. We're not doing any harm to what essentially wasn't what was not done.
Yeah.
It's just a concept plan.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And we're only concerned with the zoning regulations, and it was never part of the regulations. There's no regulation about it.
You don't have, the biggest thing is too, is I think this is a very big misconception. You don't have to have a specific plan to have a streetscape.
Yeah.
Downtown Los Altos, which to me as a planning professional is usually something you would see as the downtown Los Altos specific plan, usually is what would be there. We don't have that. We have standalone integrated into zoning. But you can have, we did First Street streetscape. We did one portion of it. And essentially, we ran out of money to do the rest of it. Mm-hmm. Because again, we don't actually have an improvement district. And for all extensive purposes, to do one block of a streetscape can cost bare minimum $3 million, all the way up to, right now, $7 million a block. So it's a very costly scenario. When the city of Burlingame did their main downtown area of only 4 blocks, that was $14 million. And they did that by a financial levy of a PBID, so a property business improvement district. And they did that, and it's a 30-year payoff by that four block stretch, which was $14 million. But that happened, the plan happened well over 10 years ago, and they broke construction in 2010. So I mean, that's just by virtue of something to kind of comprehensively understand, is there's a range in the cost, and then there's also the range and the duration of how long it takes to do these things, but also how to pay for them. So again, Loyola Corners does not have the financial capabilities to support the improvements that are being kind of visioned for the downtown or the Loyola Corners area. But that doesn't mean that the streetscape goes away. What we need to do, if that is the desire to improve the public realm, we can do that, but we need to then create and do the legwork of how are we going to do that. Today, we don't have that. We never had that. It hasn't been there since the plan was incepted in 1990. This has been a plan that started in 1985, and it has not come to fruition since. So I would not say that the plan is significantly being implemented
Okay,
today.
Nick, I just.
Yeah, it was adopted in, yeah, Nick, you're right. It was in 85.
I mean, I got involved in this whole business because I was on the Sherwood Gateway specific plan in 1990, I don't know, 1995. I mean, so I was on that committee and it went nowhere. I hear you. It went nowhere because they killed the redevelopment agencies and maybe it wasn't blighted enough to even qualify as a redevelopment agency. But there is really a value though in having those plans because it does communicate to a developer, this is what it's supposed to look like. And you can show to a developer, this is the streetscape, this is how it's supposed to look. So my question is, can the city adopt specific plans as long as they aren't impediments to development and as long as they don't conflict with the underlying zoning? And if the answer is yes, we should be doing that because in my opinion, we don't want every part of the city to look stamped out and cookie cutter and all the same. I mean, Loyola Corners should not look like downtown and Sherwood Triangle should not look like Loyola Corners. And we do want to create a sense of place and we do want people to look at their community and say, this reflects my values and what I want. And I just think that we should probably, I mean, I guess my question is if we rescind this, is there any chance that we can bring it back and kind of start over with kind of where we are today?
So every jurisdiction can develop a specific plan. One of the previous jurisdictions I was at, that's actually one of the ways that we were going to address integration of housing into a commercial center entire corridor. There was not an ounce of residential in that corridor. But we're talking about a corridor. That would be like taking the CT district and doing a specific plan for it on both sides of the street. Well, we only have one side, but Loyola is very, very small. To begin with, and especially a matter of whether or not you consider yourself Loyola Corners, you're most likely not, unless you're one of the commercial people, because there's not very many parcels that are actually in Loyola Corners. It's the surrounding area that people identify as a part of the Loyola Corners or the Loyola neighborhood. But fundamentally, I mean, yes, we can do specific plans. They are quite a bit of a big undertaking when there's and usually they're used for bigger areas, like something like a downtown with, anywhere between, 80 to 200 parcels. When we're talking about under 100, I mean, you're kind of talking about something that's more of an integration into zoning and just getting a little bit more specific and devil in the details. The sense of place for something that's in the public realm, such as a streetscape plan, that doesn't need to be in a specific plan in order to happen. And that's what I was saying previously. So I mean, like that's the thing. And unfortunately, we're gonna see bigger, more intense, dense buildings in Loyola Corners, specifically because the city has taken final action by denying projects in Loyola Corners, and we've bought property in order to circumvent development from occurring. So, and it's documented, it's been reported to the state, and we've lost. So this is something that was provided as an explicit guarantee to the state and our affirmative commitment to the creation of more housing in the city of Los Altos.
Okay, Richard wants to make a motion, and I think it's time for
I'd
him
like to
do
make
that.
a motion to approve Program 1E. Which is the update of the Loyola Corner specific plan. I'm not going to read the whole thing.
It's in the staff report.
As it is found in the staff report.
Okay. And CEQA.
And CEQA?
It is exempt from
It
CEQA.
it's exempt from CEQA.
Yeah, okay.
Great, I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance number 2.
Want me to read- I can read the whole thing?
You can read the whole thing if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can do this.
Yeah.
An ordinance. I graduated English in school.
Yeah.
An
It
ordinance.
was the 6th grade, okay.
It was the 5th.
Oh, okay.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Los Altos repealing in its entirety the Loyola Corners specific plan Chapter 14.42 of the Los Altos Municipal Code and City Council Resolution number 2017-41, and reinstating the underlying zoning district to all affected parcels to implement Program 1E of the sixth cycle housing element update.
Okay. And it's still exempt from CEQA.
And it's still exempt from SECR.
Okay. All
So
right.
help me God.
And I still second it.
Shelley still seconds it. Okay, so let's proceed to the vote.
Okay, roll call. Commissioner Disney,
Yes.
Commissioner Beninato,
Yes.
Commissioner Doran,
Yes.
Commissioner Roach,
Yes.
Commissioner Steinle,
Yes.
and Commissioner Ahi.
Yes.
Unanimous approval.
All right.
Recommendation.
And that brings us then to the last and simplest of these, which is the redesignation of that portion of the Village Court property so that it's all just CT. I'm going to propose that we just go to the motion. Quite frankly, I don't know that there's any.
I have a question. The city was supposed to consult with adjacent property owners and interested parties throughout the Village Court rezone program. And I'd like to know if the city did that.
No, we did not, and that is because our statutory due date got moved up quite significantly. I'd have to look at it really quick to see when the due date was. There's I mean, honestly, there's no time to do it. That was something, I mean, yeah, we were supposed to be able to have another 2 years to do this. So yes, that would have definitely warranted a lot of discussions. But that's partly why I wanted to make it very clear is that we have 65 days to do this, and I don't see any benefit to consultation with something that is explicitly in the housing element of that we're rezoning it from CT to R1. And furthermore, this specific program is only portion of what is, so Program 1F actually doesn't even have to exist in order for the rezone to occur. Program 1G, the table actually explicitly calls and identifies the Village Court parcel because it was identified in the fifth cycle. The consultation started 10 years ago with Village Court. I think it's highly unlikely that anything is going to change from the perspective of the residents if they're still calling for consultation. We also have no wiggle room with this, is the state will force us to do it.
What are the modifications made to 62 PUD/C7? Does that just go away?
It does in its entirety. PUD.
Wait, say that again?
It does go away in its entirety because the PUD effectively was just a reduction of the intensity of the site. So in order to be able to limit and hinder the development, to be able to essentially create the R1 component that's the back portion of the Village Court parcel, and not essentially create the CT that is essentially the front lining component. So this is something, I mean, this was integrated and put into the housing element in the fifth cycle. And this is kind of what I say with staff is these are the sins of the past. I mean, we literally have no wiggle room on this one because it was something that we said we were going to make it CT all the way back in 2015.
Yep, okay.
Also, this parcel has been rezoned before. This is not the first time. So, it's been a bit of a football, and this will make it, yeah, it'll be consistent, and consistent with everything around it. Right.
Well, I don't know if I'd say that, given that it's R1 right next to it. It's pretty low. It's a parking lot now.
Yeah, but that's true of any project that will be built along El Camino
Well, I mean,
Real.
there was a time in Los Altos where we felt like intensity should be stepped back. El Camino was going to be intense, and then it would step back into something like OA that would be a little less intense, and there would be this gradual transition into R1. And sadly, we've just sort of obliterated that concept.
We haven't, but the
Well,
state has.
that's right, but
The
we
state
are,
has.
we're doing their business.
Well, because that's the legal requirement. We have no choice.
Okay, Is this one motion for the whole rest of the,
So there's only one part, which is that, the redesignation of.
that's the only
Village Square.
motion?
That's
And
the
then the
only-
next one will be the residential housing and the manufactured?
No, that's already been
No, we
included.
did that in the.
That was in
Was
the
that
first,
already in there?
that was in the first
Okay,
motion.
sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, no, that's included in the fourteen point
Okay,
six three.
so this is the last one.
This is the very last bit. Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll do it again. Yeah, I move, no, do I have to read it? No, yeah. I do.
Yeah, you
No,
do.
I understand. I apologize for being so flip. I'd like to move to approve Chapter 1488 of the Los Altos Municipal Code pertaining to the rezoning of the parcel located at 4546 El Camino from R1-10 to Commercial Thoroughfare, CT, and repealing in its entirety the planned unit development 62-PUD C7 to implement Program 1F rezone Village Court parcel of the six-cycle housing element update and its associated exempt from CEQA. That's the motion.
Okay, second? Anybody?
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance number 3 as stated in the staff report. So.
All right, roll call. Commissioner
yes.
Disney,
Aye.
Commissioner Benenato,
Yes.
Commissioner Doran,
Yes.
Commissioner Roach,
Yes.
Commissioner Steinle,
Yes.
and Commissioner Ahi.
Yes.
Unanimous recommendation.
Okay, and that ends the discussion item and the votes. So now the next thing on our agenda is there's a review of the Commissioner Handbook, which is being done by all commissions. And that, I don't know who's doing what in that.
So I'm going to be doing that.
Okay.
I have a brief PowerPoint presentation. I could forego that if you'd like, given the,
Yeah, could we
The
move
late
that
hour?
to the next meeting?
Second,
Yeah.
okay.
unless there's some statutory requirement we're trying to meet.
I think the intent was, and honestly, it is pretty brief because there's not much to report in terms of what's changed for Planning Commission. There's a lot to report for the other commissions.
Okay,
But-
like 5 minutes?
Oh, yeah.
Go for
Yeah,
it.
no,
Oh.
I'll just say that the statutory requirement is it's late.
Yeah, thank you. You know what? I've known Jolie for like 35 years. Yay, Jolie. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
let's go.
Okay.
How do you make this work? Do you know?
Oh, yes, sort of. Let's see.
So the future news is that the intention of this is not to be a training. There will be future commission training, and stay tuned for that. It will be given by the city clerk. If there are any questions in the meantime, or quite frankly, anytime, you feel free to always ask myself or the city clerk, and then also reference the commission handbook. It is a wealth of knowledge. So I'm sure everybody's heard over about the past year, the evaluation of the overall commissions. And they found that, Los Altos has more commissions that meet more frequently with more commission members than our peer cities. So City Council adopted some changes. The commission changes in summary is meeting frequency, commission composition, powers and duties, attendance and participation, and reporting. And there were changes to the handbook about ad hoc subcommittees, commissioner liaisons, council liaisons, conflict of interest, and the election of chair and vice chair. There were changes to almost all of them, except for you can see on the highlighted row in orange to the Planning Commission. There really are no changes in terms of number of meetings. There will continue to be 24 planned, 7 members, and there's no changes to the powers and duties. Attendance and participation. Commissioners must attend 75% of regularly scheduled meetings. This is in the handbook. Commissioners may attend no more than 20% of meetings remotely.
handbook
I
change.
do just want to jump in really quick. If you guys are going to be doing, attending virtually, we need some heads up with that. It can't be like the night before type of a deal. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand that because there is some logistics that are associated with that.
Yeah, their place of dialing in, their remote location needs to get on the agenda, and our agendas go out
So how many days?
ahead of time.
Like 4 days?
The statutory due date or minimum is 72 hours. So if you cannot attend, if you don't know before the 72 hours, then you are gonna have an absence for it because we have to be able to publish where you're located as a part of it, and that's the minimum for agenda posting.
Even if you're sick?
Yes.
Okay.
So that was it.
Oh,
Um,
That was great, thank you.
hopefully you guys, I'm sure all have copies of the handbook. If not, I
Oh,
can send it, and
next
it
to
is
my
on the
bed, yeah.
website.
Thank you.
mm-hmm.
Eric, adjourn. I
Well,
moved.
no. We have a little bit more to go before we do that. Well, if there are any reports or comments, if anybody has anything to add, and if there are any potential future items, and this would be sort of to Nick, and I have a question too about this. Okay, so Nick, anything that we need to know about coming up? Like, next meeting, next time we get to look at these things? How are we doing on the getting through all the things we have to get through?
So I need to, this was obviously the second really big push that, as we all know, I mean, our housing element just got approved officially, under 2 months ago. So this has been really quick and a lot for me to have to kind of regurge. I was hoping we were going to be starting doing this several months ago. So I need to reconcile because the due date calendar that I had originally created was based on the due dates that we were afforded with our adopted housing element. And there's a lot of other, kind of things that are going in the fire. So as of right now, I can't say what we're going to do for November meetings just because of needing to kind of reconcile for code amendments. I do know that we have an actual discretionary multifamily mixed-use development that should be before the commission in January, as long as they get their last set of final plans to us in time to review them, write a report, and get it to you guys. So that's for then. But yes, there will be some more code amendments, but some of them are going to not be as explicitly black and white of exactly how we have to do it because it's a little bit more open-ended from either housing element stuff or things that are just in the code that we've identified as staff as like what we would call like omnibus type cleanups where it's these things just don't work in application. And that's the whole point where I say is the code is meant to be iterative for us to be able to revisit and kind of refine it. So.
Okay, so we'll be busy, but we don't know exactly
Yeah,
what we're going to
yeah,
be,
it's-
which
yeah.
busy thing we're going to be doing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, but there's nothing apart, because there's no development project before January at this point.
No, there's
Yeah.
nothing that's trend. Like I said, I think also too, the commission should keep in mind is that the development community, not a specific developer, but the development community has been observing to see and wait for a lot of these things to come in line. I would imagine that 2024 will be a busy year for multifamily mixed-use housing developments in Los Altos because we have peeled back some significant layers and hurdles for the development to occur.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll look forward to that. Okay, with that, get out of here.
Oh, wait,
oh.
Chair?
Yes.
Just one thing, back to the training that
yeah.
we will be doing. The city clerk is doing it, and I'm going to be working with her, and we will be doing handbook training, and we're also going to be doing sort of meeting rules and training and motion making and that kind of stuff. So just more of all around commissioner training, not just Brown Act, FPPC, and public records. So
Right,
it will be more of a comprehensive training.
right. That's coming up. And remind everybody, I guess everybody got the same email I got, which is that we have to do the FPPC training by the 25th of November because they're going away, but we have to do that. And we haven't done that in a while, as a matter of fact, so.
Yeah,
anybody
it really fell through the cracks for a lot of agencies because of COVID. So we're all trying to get everybody on board with the 1234.
And apparently it is every 2 years.
It's supposed to.
Yes, it's every 2 years.
Right, it's supposed to be, and we used to get notification of that, and that hasn't been happening, but it hasn't been happening anyway. Okay, so just remind everybody to, Jonathan. Uh-huh.
The urgency of getting it done as quickly as possible is that right now the state is paying for that training.
Mhm.
That funding is going away as of whatever date is in that email.
Yeah.
Council got that email too.
Right.
So you can do the training later, but then you're gonna do the training when you're done.
Right, okay, so I think, November 25, I think, was the cutoff date, so that gives us another 30 days to get that done. It's only 2 hours out of your life, and it's even less interesting than the insurance ones that you do, so there you are.
So it's November 25.
November 25 is the drop dead date.
Weren't there 2 trainings?
Well, there are 2 trainings, the other one is don't click on it if it looks suspicious.
Oh, that's the
Should I open that?
cybersecurity
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, and.
And actually, I'm going to tell the commissioners, because I was reminded today, you have to, at the planning commission is legally required to use the city email that you have been provided. So if you need to talk to some, like Stephanie or myself or IT, if something's not working, you do have to use it. So I know that I send my stuff to you guys via that one. But I'm just letting you know is you have to, because of you're a Brown Act body, just like, city council, and because your land use, it does affect rules differently than the other commissions.
Right, okay, all right.
Your
Okay.
first
Thank you.
installment of property tax
Thank you.
is due on that day, just so you know.
Yes, just, it's a big
It's gonna
day.
be a great day.
Yeah,